You up.
Mr. Chairman, we should be streaming momentarily.
Great. All right, looks like we're live. Good morning, everyone. This is the second day. It'll be a half day of our final meeting for the year of the Select Committee on Blockchain, Financial Technology, and Digital Innovation Technology. We've got just a couple more topics to close up. And we're going to begin this morning with commercial filing system discussion. And we've obviously had a good bit of discussion around a bill draft, which we'll take a look at and take final action on if we choose to. And with that, I'd invite the Secretary of State's office to join us. Deputy Wheeler, welcome. Ms. Janes, welcome. And I'd be interested in beginning with any updates.
Mr. Chairman, I think we do need to still take roll.
Oh, let's do that. Good point, Mr. Co-Chairman. Go ahead and give us a quick roll call, if you would. Mary Beth or Clarissa?
Senator Dockstetter.
He's excused.
Senator Driscoll.
Also excused.
Senator Nethercott.
Here.
Representative Greer.
Here.
Representative Lindholm.
Here.
Representative Yin.
Excused.
He's excused.
Mr. Kaufman.
Here.
Ms. Long.
Excused.
Mr. Ravel.
Excused.
Co-Chairman Olson.
Here.
Co-Chairman Rothfuss.
Here. All right. My apologies for that. And with that, again, welcome Deputy Wheeler, Ms. Janes. I think the first thing to maybe visit about on this topic is if there are any updates. We've been chatting about this for a little while, and I know that most of your bandwidth has been occupied through early November on the election. But I was wondering if you had any initial thoughts before we sort of take a look at the bill and take action on it, get public comment, and have a discussion about it with regard to our prior discussions or any of the conversations you've had on the commercial filing system update.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Karen Wheeler, Deputy Secretary of State, and good morning to you and the committee. Yes, our bandwidth was pretty well stretched during August and September and then November, and we're very thankful we had a uneventful election season in Wyoming. It went very well and very smoothly.
Good.
So in the meantime, I can tell you as far as an update that we have started working on a draft for the RFP for a consultant. We are still in the beginning stages, but we are putting the framework together. So we are moving forward with that.
Excellent. And do you have a team or a group that's kind of putting that together? I think we'd certainly like to be involved, members of the committee, as we contemplate what that RFP might include and try and get some stakeholders that understand how this build out might go. So I'd ask that as that progresses, you kind of keep us involved, and I'd be happy to work with you on that. And I think other members would as well.
Oh, absolutely, Mr. Chairman. And we fully intend to bring forward to you the initial stages of a draft. And again, we are just in the beginning of it. So as we get a little bit further and have something substantive to bring to you and have an opportunity to work collaboratively with you, we certainly will. Our team right now involves myself, our Director of our Administrative Division, which oversees the technology side, and then the Director of our Business Division as well, and obviously the Secretary himself.
Excellent. Okay. Thank you, Deputy. Any questions for Deputy Wheeler? All right, seeing none. Anything else, Ms. Wheeler, at this time? And we'll keep you around certainly as we go through public comment and take a look at the bill, but anything to add?
Mr. Chairman, I don't have anything further, but I'm happy to answer any questions.
Great. Thank you both for being here this morning.
Thank you.
Yeah. All right, back to the committee. We have some public comment available before we get to the bill draft. The bill draft that we'll be considering is the same version that we had. We didn't recommend any changes previously, so it should look familiar as we work through that. but obviously the intent, as we previously discussed, and so those that might not be familiar with it, is to put together an upgraded commercial filing system for the state of Wyoming through the Secretary of State's office, which is a more, I guess, recognizing of the advanced technologies we've been working on, trying to get a registration system that utilizes an API for filing interface, uses blockchain and other technologies for registration, so that there's transparency and permanency and confidence in the records, allows for, in an ideal state, recognition of public-private key relationships and authentication through the Secretary of State's office, and then also provides for an opportunity to do UCC filings and other types of filings through the through this front door, instead of all paper filings that were not all paper filings, but a lot of paper filings that we still rely on, other than for direct corporate registration. So really to streamline it and make it the envy of probably not just the country, but the world, if we get it that way. And I think it would make Wyoming an attractive place to file, register, and do business, as we're obviously always trying to move towards. And then we've had discussions in past meetings about the fact that that Delaware, which is a leader for corporate filings, ends up with about $1.3 billion per year in fees and transactions, which as we're trying to find ways to improve revenue for the state as while diversifying the economy, that seems like a good opportunity for us to grow. All right, any further questions? Representative Lindholm, I see you've kind of come back on video. Did you have any questions for the Secretary of State's office before we get into public testimony?
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chairman, and I really appreciate everybody's involvement on this kind of deal. And I know there's been some back and forth, especially in my own court. We had talked a little bit last go around, and I'm sorry I missed most of your testimony at getting my phone blown up. But what does it look like moving forward for the Secretary of State's office? Is there interest in any one of these directions and running the ball, where you would appreciate the legislature's help, or even want us to get involved in this? What does that look like for the Secretary of State's office?
Thank you, Representative. Back to you, Deputy Wheeler. Thoughts?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and Representative Lindholm. I'm assuming, are you referencing the commercial filing aspect of this bill or other areas?
Representative?
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chairman. I would say anything to do with getting more people to your website to file their businesses. Is there any aspect of that you'd be like, this is the spot where we need a law change, or we need something to do with appropriation or something like that?
Deputy Wheeler?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Representative Lindholm. I can tell you right now, for the filings that we do online, the initial filings and annual reports, almost 85% of all filings are done online in this office. We have, as we talked in the last meeting, for years, we have talked about wishing we had the ability to advertise Wyoming and everything Wyoming has to offer to bring your business here, and the ease in filing with the Secretary's office, the strength of our laws. So as we discussed in the last meeting, that is really one area that we would like to explore one day when we have the financial means to do that. We have also talked about in the past the ability to do other filings online, such as amendments, but with that comes the area of wanting to make it secure enough that we don't allow just anyone to file an amendment on an entity, so we don't run into the risk of what we've had in the past of corporate hijacking. So there are areas that, yes, we certainly could drive more people to our website to filing online, but there are little logistics that we have to work out that go with it as well.
Go ahead, Representative Lindholm.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and I certainly respect those concerns, having may or may not been kind of subject to corporate hijacking in the past. There's zero good times involved with that. But in regards to how I understand the concerns that the Secretary of State's office is concerned about budgetary restraints. The whole state's concerned about those budgetary restraints right now. But I think in large part, I think most of the legislature understands that this is a retail end of our state. We do make money off of these filing aspects, and I do think most people understand that we've got to, in order to make more money, we're going to have to spend a little bit more money, and if we can ramp your activity in doing so, whether it's an online filing or something like that, that would be something that I think we should chase. And just listening to your testimony, you guys would be interested in chasing it too. So I guess what kind of activity from this committee or from the legislators on this committee you would like to see, because we're really time of the essence, but everybody on here knows how to run the ball.
Go ahead, Ms. Wheeler.
Mr. Chairman, thank you, Representative Lindholm. Well, I think obviously the road we're going down now, the feasibility study on our filing system was one avenue, but we were really encouraged with the success of our marketing campaign that we did during the election season, showing our voters the methods they could vote, whether it was absentee, in person, encouraging them, showing them the safety around voting during COVID. And I wouldn't mind down the road actually doing some kind of a campaign, a marketing campaign, to encourage people to come to Wyoming. And that is one area we're looking at, is our surrounding states, how many active entities they have registered with their office, what their fees are, and just other ways we could market our great state to form a business in.
Go ahead, Representative.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I completely agree. And I've talked enough about corporate filings and other entities that my computer Facebook should have picked this up by now. And I should be seeing ads for business filings in other states, but I'm not. Nobody's doing that. And I think that, I think with your guys' targeting that you guys developed during your election, I couldn't stop seeing your damn messages. And I guarantee I vote. I do. Not that it did me much good, but I do. And so I really think that is such an opportunity for the state of Wyoming to start targeting folks, because as we've seen, and the numbers that you guys have reported in the past, business filings are way up in the state of Wyoming during this whole COVID crisis, which is a little bit crazy to think about, that folks are just staying home and they're finally jumping on that crazy idea that they had at one time and running the ball on their business. I love that idea. And I hope we keep seeing those increases happen. So in order for us to pull the trigger on getting this down the road for the Secretary of State's office, I think in large part, I don't think you'll see much pushback in this regard. What would be your preference? Would it be to be able to keep some of that domiciling money by a percentage that you guys bring into the state every year for the purpose of advertising or the purpose of, increasing those domiciles? What would that look like in a perfect world for you? If we were writing a bill right now, pretend like we are, we might be.
Go ahead, Deputy.
Mr. Chairman, Representative Lindholm, well, that certainly is an interesting offer, and I appreciate that. On the fly, it's really hard to say how much we would like to have or what we could do with it. I think as the policymakers, I would defer to you as to what you feel would be appropriate. But I think quite honestly, when I look back at how we were able to pull together the marketing campaign during the election, that is certainly something that we could move forward with in a little bit more expeditious and quicker move than we could with the RFP and going down that road. This is something that I think we can put out there much more quickly than what we're working on right now. That being said, the cost, because we have not looked at what markets we would identify and those types of things, I can't give you even a ballpark right now, but we could certainly look at that.
Just one more question.
Go ahead, please continue.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chairman. I think that's helpful, and we can probably do a WAG. We can take a guess at what we want to look at the first go around and try to figure that out. But I do think, ultimately, you did say, whatever our purview is. So I appreciate that. I think both paths, if we're going to do this, API aspect, I think that's a whole nother lane of possibilities. But you're right, it's going to be a lot longer. It's going to take a lot longer. And the state of Wyoming's struggling now. This is the time to run the ball and doing some other things and get wild with it. And so I think there's real merit in acting in a much quicker manner in this regard, a separate lane, and trying multiple different aspects. And I appreciate that the Secretary of State's office is wanting to go down this road. I think that's great. That's it for me, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Representative Lindholm. And I think that you're on to, a key concept here. First of all, there are multiple ideas, and you look at us as a state, we're obviously struggling for revenue, and we've got a product that has been very successful. It's a high quality product, and that is our business division and our governance of business in the state of Wyoming. If you are a business and you've got a good product that the market likes, you find ways to advertise that product, and then you find ways to improve that product so that more people want it. And we are not doing as much of either of those things as I think we could be doing, and we have that opportunity. So I think, honestly, this bill, we probably, Representative Lindholm, need to add something into it so that the title clearly captures the concept of us using some of this revenue for marketing, whether it's new revenue, whether it's old revenue, and addressing both of those potential topics and meeting the interests of the Secretary of State's office. I think we can do both of these things well. Any final thoughts before we go to public testimony, Deputy Wheeler?
No, Mr. Chairman, thank you.
Okay, thanks. Committee, anyone else? All right. With that, then, let's go to public comment. I know we've got a number of people that are available. And Mary Beth, if you'd start bringing in some of our folks, I think we're bringing in Balaji Srinivasan first. There he is joining us. Looks like you can hear us and see us. So welcome. Please introduce yourself to the Select Committee, and the floor is yours on this topic. Welcome to the committee.
Dear Mr. Chairman, thank you for your time, and hello to the Select Committee. So just to briefly introduce myself, my name is Balaji Srinivasan, and I'm the former Chief Technology Officer of Coinbase, the largest cryptocurrency company in the US. I'm also a former general partner at Andreessen Horowitz, a $16.5 billion venture capital firm. Prior to that, I taught computer science, statistics, and bioinformatics at Stanford University, won the MIT R35 award, taught an online course for more than 250,000 students, have been an early investor in Bitcoin, Ethereum, and several billion-dollar startups, and have founded and sold multiple technology companies. I've come to speak today to tell you that Wyoming has all the pieces to become not just a national leader, but a global leader in technology and cryptocurrency, as some of you were just discussing, that is all the pieces except one, namely a streamlined online entity registration system. Just to set the stage, the pioneering work that you on the Select Committee on Blockchain, Financial Technology, and Digital Innovation, the work that you have done over the last few years has not gone without notice. Many partners at billion-dollar VC funds and CEOs of billion-dollar companies have been following your work with great interest. And from clarifying Bitcoin's treatment under commercial law, to building the fintech sandbox, to creating crypto banks, protecting code of speech, allowing insurers to invest in crypto, and removing tax barriers to earning and using crypto, Wyoming has proven it is extremely forward-thinking. And the Select Committee has continued Wyoming's tradition of legal innovation, which includes the 1977 invention of the LLC itself. The last piece needed to take Wyoming to infinity is a streamlined online entity registration system to allow entrepreneurs to more easily programmatically create Wyoming LLCs and C corporations. The time is right. As you may have seen on Twitter, San Francisco's mismanagement has led my colleagues to seek refuge in better managed cities like Miami and Austin. Because of remote work, billions of dollars in venture capital will now be allocated in more tech-friendly jurisdictions, and Wyoming could capture a large slice of that newly mobile capital. Here's why. If you've seen Stripe Atlas, you can go to stripe.com/docs/Atlas. It allows people to programmatically create Delaware C corporations. Liberalizing Wyoming's online entity registration system would allow tech founders and investors to create the equivalent of Stripe Atlas for Wyoming focused in particular on incorporating crypto and blockchain-related corporate vehicles. This is particularly important for crypto. By analogy, if you think about how important it is to be able to create a new web page or social media profile without having to file paper documents to incorporate a newspaper each time, similarly, in the blockchain space, it is a standard practice to create automated corporate vehicles like smart contracts and DAOs. A liberalized online entity registration system will allow Wyoming to collect fees for every such programmatic registration, and you would become one of the, if not the dominant players in this emerging market. Now, if you liberalize online entity registration, I will personally commit to evangelizing Wyoming as the Delaware of crypto on a fairly large Twitter feed. By both funding startups to do this and persuading existing ones to set up in Wyoming. I will also help you recruit engineering talent to join the Wyoming government to help with crypto setup. And we'll try to persuade online incorporators like Stripe Atlas itself to add Wyoming incorporation itself as an option. If that is not successful, I will fund startups to actually go and set up online incorporation in Wyoming. So that's what I can do as a US citizen and as a well-wisher of everything you're doing. I think that liberalizing online entity registration can also generate a large amount of revenue for the state. This is something which, especially after the coronavirus crisis, is potentially very, very necessary and helpful. So those are my prepared remarks. I'm happy to answer any questions.
Balaji, thank you so much for being here and really appreciate those comments. It's exactly what we're hoping for. And I think you've really elucidated a vision that we all strongly share. So thank you for bringing those comments. Committee, questions for Balaji? Go ahead, Representative Lindholm.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chairman. I was listening. and Balaji, I am 100% certain I'm going to screw up your name. I apologize in advance. So you said, if we run the ball, then you're all in.
Absolutely.
And so for the committee members and for those listening in, Balaji's a pretty well-known name in this space, in the tech space, and it doesn't he doesn't flinch from these kinds of things. So and he's got the means to do it. When we're moving this ball forward, what does it look like for you? If we had a bill moving forward, Secretary of State's office, they're good, they're on board, they're running the ball. What does that look like for you as an investor type, somebody that can talk to other folks about Wyoming?
So I would say, there's 3 or 4 things at a minimum that we can do. First, we would write blog posts and tweets that sort of talk about how Wyoming is becoming the Delaware of crypto. These kinds of shifts only happen, once a generation, sometimes once a century, like an opportunity for the next Wall Street, an opportunity for the next Delaware. So number one, we would evangelize this and make sure that everybody in technology knows about it and have comparison tables, feature charts that essentially show why your regulatory regime is superior to others. There's an article that I can share with the committee by my colleague Mark Anderson in 2014 called "Turn Detroit into Drone Valley." This is part of our broader thesis that cities and states can differentiate themselves, not necessarily by tax breaks, which is always nice, but by regulation breaks, right? By essentially doing things that don't cost you anything, that simply by putting a line through an obsolete law or by allowing for online incorporation, that doesn't cost you anything. When money is tight, I understand that. But what it does do is it makes something legal that was not permissible before. And so number one, we would evangelize that within our community. Number two, I would go to both CEOs of gigantic companies and funds, as well as founders of small startups, and try to get people to use the new bill and to actually build services on top of that. Stripe Atlas shows that's possible. I was actually also one of the very first e-citizens, or rather e-residents of Estonia, which, as you know, has done something fairly similar. I know folks in the Singapore government. I know folks in other governments, both internationally and domestically, who are into this kind of thing. So there's a community of folks around the world who are what I consider technological progressives that would start companies around that. So that is number two, or would add functionality to existing corporate vehicles. Number three is, if it's helpful to you, I don't know the exact point of contact, and please excuse me if I'm not speaking to the right audience, but if you actually need the tech talent, the engineers to go and do this, because engineers can be hard to find, I can help you recruit those as well. Basically, this is something that is of ideological importance to our community. So we'd find somebody who, had done well in something else, and they could essentially do public service for a while and set up wonderful APIs, for your government. So that's number 3. And then number 4 is, I can both personally direct some capital, and then also I'm connected to large pools of capital to invest in the companies that are newly enabled by this. So those are kind of 4 things. A, evangelize. B, get existing companies to add features. C, get engineering talent to help the Wyoming government accomplish this, to come to Delaware crypto. And D, allocate capital towards new businesses that arise as a consequence.
Thank you, Mr. Srinivasan. Representative Lindholm, anything to follow up with?
No, sir.
Senator Nethercott?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Good morning. So I am an attorney and serve on the Judiciary Committee as well, and am struck by the promises and representations made concerning filing systems associated with business and corporate documents, but the failure across the country for court filing systems and appropriate technology there. So each state in the country, as well as the federal court systems, are struggling with establishing workable court filing systems, which is a similar concept and similar, I think, code and software requirements associated with them. If you're interested in developing this, there is a huge market, both at the federal level and in each state and local jurisdiction, for establishing reliable filing systems for the courts. Can you speak to your understanding about that as well?
Mr. Srinivasan, go ahead.
Yes, Senator Nethercott and Chairman Rothfuss. So, with everything, what we want to always do is start small, dream big. And so working with you folks closely in Wyoming, having a tight loop with the small number of decision makers on this, we could get the thing working. We'd have first few 100 or 1,000 companies set up through that, figure out the bugs and so on. And then what we would do is, take that to other friendly states. For example, Colorado's next door. Jared Police is, he was also on the Congressional Bitcoin Caucus. He's, I think, fairly technologically progressive. And we would essentially take Wyoming's example and make you folks a leader. But we'd start within the state, and then we'd extend it to other kinds of things. With legal stuff, it's all about the edge cases. So, we're happy to fund this kind of thing. We want to start with that one use case and then generalize from there. But I'm happy to talk further. I can give you my contact information, and we can, enumerate what you want to see, and then how we might be able to build towards that.
Follow up, Senator. That would make Senator Nethercott's life a lot easier. I think that's what she's getting at. That's a good thing.
Great.
Mr. Srinivasan, I'm sorry. I'm going to go to committee members. Mr. Bill.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and Mr. Srinivasan. Thank you very much for this. I think I want to just sort of add to what Mr. Srinivasan's saying in that I literally have in my email box in front of me multiple inquiries from former colleagues, friends, connections, friend of friends who are managing funds, hedge funds, private equity funds, venture capital funds, looking to establish digital asset oriented funds, who are asking me for advice on how they can domicile in Wyoming and whether they should set up their LLC here, et cetera. And what they're looking at is this very interesting combination of characteristics that really only Wyoming provides right now, between the tax, the LLC laws, the privacy laws, the digital asset laws. It's a unique moment for Wyoming. And I don't think that they're getting advice from their attorneys, however, to go ahead and file for their LLC in Wyoming. The muscle memory is go ahead and file in Delaware. We've got the sort of deep precedents there that we're most comfortable with, the Chancery Court, et cetera. And so even though they want to do it and they're asking how to do it, when they ultimately speak to their attorneys, they're sort of pushed off to Delaware. So I think there are a few pieces that need to fall in place to really change this meaningfully for Wyoming, to have any sort of meaningful revenue opportunity for Wyoming. We have to create a better mousetrap than Delaware has. And I think some advertising dollars and some streamlining, great. I think that'll move it up on the margin. But if we're really talking about creating a new revenue stream for Wyoming, there's a moment in time, and we have it right now, to develop something that is better. We've got folks from the private sector asking us to do it. Mr. Srinivasan has come on here and offered to help do it. I'm fully in support of it.
Thank you, Joel. Response, Mr. Srinivasan?
Yeah, so Mr. Reville is absolutely right. There's a saying, in tech by Larry Page, founder of Google, that 10x is easier than 10%. And Wyoming has 10x better crypto laws in other places. You can literally put that in a feature matrix, and you can export something, rather than, natural resources are fine, commodities are fine, mining is fine, all that stuff is fine, but you can export a digital good, which is a better policy regime. And the fact that you allow certain things that other people do not, that it's legal where others aren't, that's not a 10x better, that's infinity x better, because you're allowing 1 and they're allowing 0. So you have this incredible advantage, and we just need to make it easier with online entity registration. And I think that just opens the door to everything.
Further questions? Go ahead, Mr. Kaufman.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you for the testimony. And this question really is for the group, because obviously I spend a lot of time with the folks at the Secretary of State's office and do a lot of filings. And so what I'm having a hard time wrapping my head around is when I talk to clients and we're doing entity registrations, we're already doing them online. We're doing them instantaneously. So I'm trying to understand what is it else that we need to move that needle. And I'm totally understanding the streamlining, the advertising dollars, but is it the API? Is that really what the market is wanting out there? Because that's, with respect to the entity formations, that's the piece that I'm just not connecting, because we already, I file entities in about 6 different states on a regular basis, and Wyoming, and Delaware is one of them. Wyoming's is by far the easiest and the fastest and already online. So I just want to understand what exactly we're talking about with respect to the entity filings.
Mr. Srinivasan.
So Mr. Kaplan, yes. So I think the API is a very important component of it. Essentially, what we want to be able to do is potentially register 100 entities in a day. Why? Because we might set up 100 smart contracts in a day. And Wyoming would receive 100 entity and corporation fees in a day, and you might give some kind of scale discount. It's a difference between, that might seem, well, why would you want to set up 100 in a day? Well, you have 100 different smart contracts, you have 100 different DAOs, just like you might set up 100 different web pages in a day programmatically. Being able to do something programmatically puts it in a totally different category. And really, this is just entries in a database, and I'm not saying that you can't do the normal manual incorporation for other kinds of things. And you might have, for example, to be clear, if a law firm wants to sort of supervise that and kind of sign off on the client before they get API access or something, there's lots of different ways of doing that. I'm a win-win player, so I want everybody to win and get fees or whatever if need be, right? But that is, I think, a really important thing, which would be a 0 to 1, being able to programmatically do things and having a good API for this. With Stripe Atlas, we can get the exact API calls that are necessary. Like Estonia also has something called X-Road, which is kind of their entire government is sort of set up on this backbone. I can help on the specific technical details, but I think that's a big piece of it. Caitlin Long will also have some thoughts on streamlined online entity registration and may have some complementary feature requests besides API itself.
Thank you, Mr. Srinivasan. Follow up, Mr. Kaufman. All right, and I think one of the concepts there, Mr. Srinivasan, is that there probably is a list of killer apps, so to speak, that would go along with a streamlined, high-power corporate filing system that would provide utility to industry, and being able to file 100 or even 10,000. I mean, you think about the fact that we have Series LLC filing 10,000 entities in a day. I'm curious to see how long that would take, Mr. Kaufman. I'm guessing, even though we've got a great system, he's still going to bill a lot for that. And I wouldn't want to do that job. getting back though to the approach, and you've laid out a lot of resources and a lot of things that you would be willing to work with us and partner with us on. We were talking about, the traditional government approach earlier, which is an RFP, trying to get somebody to do this work. But we're hearing a lot from stakeholders, from folks like you that know this space and understand and have the resources, that there might just be a group out there that's willing to make this happen if we can put an arrangement around it. And we may not need to hire anybody. We might need to just potentially put together maybe a little legal entity that has all of the horses, as Representative Lindholm was saying, that it needs, and then just make this happen and effectively have that entity, which, I know the University of Wyoming is interested in being a collaborator on this. Maybe we work with the university, public-private partnership, get something up and running, and then allow, as you said, allow the stakeholders to end up making some money off of it for their time and energy. And then we end up licensing that out to other states and entities, like Senator Nethercott's discussing, where once you've got a system in place that allows you to do legally respectable filings with public-private key signatures. I mean, there's a lot of very good things that could go into a filing system and legitimize that. That we could put together a product that wouldn't just be for the corporate filing system, and this entity could benefit. I mean, does that seem like a reasonable path forward? And if not, what's our best path forward, honestly, just to get this done? I don't know that an RFP anymore is that path, even though that's what we've been working with the Secretary of State's office on.
Well, so, look, you're the expert on, your side of things. But from our standpoint, there's a lot of independently wealthy people in crypto who want to give back. And, we could we could organize donations, we can organize crowdfunding. This is valuable enough that I think you would get open source labor to help you with it, because it sort of carves a path forward for the future. It ensures, because otherwise what happens is people need to go overseas. They need to go to Switzerland, they need to go to Singapore, they need to go to other places that have liberalized crypto regimes. A lot of Americans would prefer to stay in the US. And so you'll get a lot of patriots who will contribute their time and their energy to do this. And you don't actually need a platoon of developers usually. Often, like, just one really good engineer can do it. But that person would need to be paired with somebody who can essentially get them the permissions to the database, right? Because it's one thing to write the code, it's another thing to be able to write to a .gov website and kind of navigate the labyrinth there, which is your guys' specialty, and I'm sure we can learn. But that would I think be the pairing. We could bring the engineering talent, but we would need somebody, or some small group or some legal entity that had the power to actually, shift the APIs and write to the Wyoming State database.
Thank you, Mrs. Srinivasan. And one other question I've got for you, and I'll go to Joel in a second, but I think honestly, the suggestion and offer of evangelizing a product once we have a product is something that would mean the world to us and would be very empowering for the system as it takes off. But one thing I'd ask is, again, getting back to what are the pinch points, what are the needs, what are the killer apps? Honestly, if you could reach out to your community and say, hey, if we were building a corporate filing system from scratch, that leveraged blockchain distributed ledger technology, and that had automated functionality and had an API, what would the feature set be that you would want?
Yep.
And honestly, if we collect that information, that would be tremendous. It would be of great value for us to really know what industry is reaching out for and trying to learn about. So I think that would be a great utility to us if you could provide us with that support as well.
Absolutely. So there's actually 5 companies where I would reach out to, and those are AngelList, Carta, Stripe, Clerky, and CapTables.io. Each of which, and there may be some I'm forgetting, but each of those do a fair amount of online incorporation, either of startups or of funds or of LLCs or crypto companies and so on and so forth. And so I'd reach out to the people at those companies and I'd ask them to, I would need a point of contact on the Wyoming side, try to sort of wrangle what the common feature set is, what APIs they have, and do kind of a product definition thing. And the critical thing would be, I think, that this might be one of the highest volume incorporation channels in the world, or certainly in the US, because you do programmatic incorporation of crypto vehicles, which could be transformative. By the way, one way of thinking about it, think about how many more websites there are than newspapers, okay? And that's kind of the analogy between crypto vehicles versus companies. There literally might turn out to be 1,000x as many smart contracts as there are companies. And the thing about it is you can set the fees to permit scale discounts and just book revenue with like, it's literally like a software business. You have one set of regulations that you put out there, you build the APIs, you have the things, and you just mint money from there on out. And it's a very scalable source of revenue for the government, especially in, tough times. Eventually that becomes maybe like Alaska's oil, dividend, where just it's the center of power for the whole space, becoming a pioneer in that space. So that's how I would think about it. Get those folks together, get the feature set, work with someone on your team, and then go from there.
Excellent. Thank you, Mr. Srinivasan. Mr. Reville.
Thank you, Mr. Co-Chairman. I just want to add to that public exploration that we should be talking with the law firms that represent these companies. And I can't stress enough how important it is that we have the Chancery Court angle working in parallel with this effort. Because ultimately it's the attorneys advising these firms. Now, once we have the momentum and the sort of network effect that Mr. Srinivasan's describing, then the flywheel's going and we're okay. But to get those initial attorneys to sort of say, yeah, let's go ahead and register in Wyoming instead of Delaware, I think is going to require more than just features.
Well, so just to
Go
speak
ahead,
to that.
Mr. Srinivasan. Yep.
Sorry, yeah. So Mr. Reville, it's an excellent point. One thing that I think is a good sort of precedent for this, if you look at what AngelList has done with rolling funds, they have combined legal innovation with technical innovation. If you're not familiar with this, rolling funds are essentially a way for any online influencer to quickly set up a fund, and AngelList handles the back end paperwork. And so that's like a combination legal / tech innovation where, kind of that should have happened 5 or 10 years ago in some sense, but there were a bunch of things, operational things that the company had to learn about. And then they were able to get the right lawyers, because the really good lawyers understand how to pioneer and innovate within the legal system, and not just do what's already being done. And that's how actually you kind of push forward into new kinds of vehicles. This is like, the lawyers who in a sense took a risk doing crypto law early on in 2013, 2014, have done actually quite well for themselves over the last 5 or 6 years. They've built a practice within their firm around that. So I do think there are pioneering lawyers, within Wyoming and outside, who can help on this. And we pair them with technologists, and that's how I proceed. At least that's my thinking.
Thank you, Mr. Srinivasan. Go ahead and follow up if you want, Mr. Reville.
Actually, if I could just ask Senator Nethercott sort of how this sits with the timing and capacity for our new Chancery Court, in her opinion. That would be interesting to know.
Senator?
Sure. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Revelle, the timing is perfect because statutorily, the legislature required that the Chancery Court be set up with an electronic filing system. And so obviously there isn't one that exists currently now. And so it's in the ground stages and phases of that. So it would dovetail nicely into that particular plan.
Thank you, Senator. Follow up, Mr. Bill? Okay. Committee, any additional questions for Mr. Srinivasan? Mr. Srinivasan, thank you so much for your time. And I think the committee would appreciate continuing to engage with you, ask questions if you'd be willing to continue that engagement with us. And one of the things that really, and you probably know this well, but the strength of this committee over the years, it hasn't been that we have great ideas. It's that great ideas have been brought to us by folks like you and stakeholders. And we've just, I guess we've had the audacity to listen to those great ideas and then act on them. And that's really what it's been about. So these partnerships with folks like you really have enabled the progress that we've made. And we value this relationship with you as we try and build something that I think we share your vision and see a lot of opportunity for Wyoming, for stakeholders, and for the global crypto and digital asset community to benefit from from this work if we get it right. And I do see now that maybe a different path is developing, and I'm going to touch base back with the Secretary of State's office. Maybe there's a quicker, better way than just trying to hire somebody to get this work done. Because I do think if you and you know the community very well, believe that there simply would be a groundswell of support out there where we can bring goodwill together and get first of kind built here in Wyoming. That's a better path, honestly.
Yeah, and one thing I would just say, sir, is don't underrate what Wyoming has done. You are like a scrappy startup that has shown tremendous progress. That every $1 billion fund and VC and CEO I know has been following you and impressed. And now what we want to do is, as we would invest in the startup that's shown great potential, we want to invest. There's just that one feature that I think we need to kind of drop a huge amount of capital and talent and so on in. I'm happy to talk to whoever wants to get in touch, however to follow up. Caitlin put me in touch with the committee, so I don't know what the right channel is, but my personal email is balags@balags.com. It's basically my Twitter handle, just balags@balags.com, like that. And please email me, and I'm happy to get on the phone or whatever it is. I'm at your disposal, and this is pretty important to us as a community.
Excellent. Thank you so much for your time today, and we look forward to that continued relationship.
Okay. Thank you very much,
Appreciate
everybody.
it. Bye. All right, Mary Beth, who is up next?
Mr. Chairman, I see Dave Murray has his hand up.
All right, let's bring in Mr. Moreno. He was scheduled to provide testimony as well, and he's been involved with this discussion all along. Mr. Murray, please come on in. Welcome, Mr. Murray. Please introduce yourself once again, and the floor is yours.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. My name is David Murray. I'm a Wyoming native and kind of been following the space since the beginning. And we've been playing around with some hacks at the university there and had a little bit of a success there. But yeah, we're pushing the API, some sort of connectivity there and a better interface. But yeah, I just wanted to applaud Mr. Sarnavi for his comments and everybody else's work so far on this bill. Just kind of wanted to look at the overall of it, but I believe you're correct possibly in the fact that a different non-traditional approach from this traditional RFP would be a better product in the end. It's not a traditional product, and so going about it in a different way makes complete sense. So kind of going into the bill there, as well as the due diligence portion, sorry, on page 4, it allocates $250,000 to do the study, and not sure if that is best selected through the Secretary of State, and no harm intended, but yeah, perhaps it's just, again, something more out of their wheelhouse than they're typically dealing with, and not sure if that would be better suggested through other channels, through the select committee itself, or as this bill gets reworked, not sure if that is the best approach. It seems like it might be kind of like turning the Titanic, or in this case, a Union Pacific locomotive. It's kind of set on its tracks and it's in its course, and difficult to kind of steer in a new direction. And it would be probably a long sweeping turn instead of more of a pivot, in my mind. So yeah, I think a complete different approach to that. But I do like the language in it, and it is short timelines. It has to get the job done. This is, time is of the essence in this, really. And echoing Senator Nethercott's comments, yeah, this does dovetail so nicely with the Chancery Court and UCC filings. Was a question of Mr. Kaufman's, is what other attributes and what other things. There's many things that come along with this. It's not just the API. The API is a distinct advantage, but the programmatic, filing is. It all adds value, and you can't really have one component without the other. And it really does create this kind of avant-garde of marketing, jurisdictionally and regulatory. It really does create that marketing approach all by itself. You have to get the word out naturally, but it spreads naturally when you have something like this. And like you said, you keep making the product better. We have a great product. Trying to even push that further, if I may, is the opportunity to make an example. And this is a first, one of a kind in the world. With the conversations of yesterday with DAOs, and in private talks we've discussed this in different groups. But I see the distinct ability to create a DAO of the entire business division. The business registration division has, as it is a database, and this is distributed ledger technology is uniquely suited for databases. So I would like to see some sort of clause in there potentially that does even take it one step further and does actually fully automate within smart contracts, perhaps not in the short term, but in a second version. But it would be, again, to think really big, think in the long term, and how this would be even a larger deal if this was actually handed over, reducing the size of government, which is in everybody's favor, with all the security protocols, obviously, and in consideration. But this would be a massive deal when you're talking marketing. If we could actually automate through smart contracts in a safe way, without clearly the potential corporate hijacking, and all of these other, security issues. But that's what audits are for, and that's what beta testing is for. But having that long-term vision, I think, is really important at this point, and have that discussion now and not later on how this can become a DAO and how this is uniquely suited for that. And the select committee, I applaud on all of your work. It's been great and very trend-setting, but to continue to be a leader, if other states were to adopt something similar, we would still have to continue innovating from as the leader. So I think the vision on a DAO in this regard is very important, and we are setting it up right now. So this is the time to have that discussion, I would say. And we did make some progress yesterday in the select committee conversation, and that it's still not entirely clear. DAOs are still in their infancy, like everything else. But having that conversation sooner than later, I think, is again going to be a massive win on many levels, being marketing and usability, and really pushing the envelope in what can be done in this space. And then I did have one specific question, and it was kind of that's on page 2, line 9, and it references an authenticated digital corporate identity, and it's not further described, and I'm not sure if that is relating to some sort of new digital ID component, or if that is referring to registered agents, or I'm not sure if you can provide any clarity on that.
Yeah, Mr. Murray. We've got a little feedback there. Who's feedback? All right. Well, Mr. Murray, on that, we're kind of contemplating the same thing that we were looking at with digital identity, which that organizational digital identity. And I think the idea there is you can imagine a circumstance where your corporation has a clearly publicly available public key, or a set of public keys based on contact, based on transaction, however you would want to configure that. But that would be something that would be available and apparent, and that could then be a corporate identity that could be linked to, getting back at Mr. Allen's conversation yesterday, you'd probably want some unique ID specific to a corporate entity that would not be transitory, and then you'd want your public keys based on the public keys that you're utilizing, but those should not be your actual corporate identity, which should be a UID. I mean, there's a lot of and you're aware of this, and you've been in this space. So just trying to look to a sophisticated process where it's very easy to digitally interact with and authoritatively acknowledge and recognize a Wyoming registered corporation because of an identity that can be linked to a good address, a very strong address that is authoritative. That kind of concept is I think a killer app for smart contracts and for those that want to innovate in this space would be a strong and authoritative handle for that corporation digitally. Does that help to clarify?
Yeah, definitely. That's what I kind of had in mind. But yeah, it may as this bill evolves, be worthwhile to add in a explanation on that.
Gotcha. All right. Thank you. Any questions for Mr. Murray? Questions for Mr. Murray? Thank you so much. We appreciate your continued engagement. And as we start to contemplate how to build this out, we'll continue to keep you engaged. It seems like there might be as we discussed, a better, faster way. And you've been involved with that and through the development of the API for the registration queries as well. So thank you for all the work that you've done on this as well.
Yeah, I appreciate that. And my group and I, we would certainly be open to being a part of some sort of working group if there was a larger group. And I would certainly, we're continuing to develop and build out what we've already started. And so I'm sure, it is a race, and I'm sure that in the private sector and something very sleek and robust and functional can always make it prettier, but it's a time thing. And through the traditional channels, it's going to be a much longer route. And I would say probably a lesser product. Wouldn't have all the functionality that we would in the industry would hope to see. So yeah, I would certainly applaud that effort. But yeah, time is of the essence, and certainly Wyoming needs to pivot financially into this, and not to make that same mistake of in the 70s to not capitalize on such incredible invention. So yeah, thank you for all your hard work there.
Thank you, Mr. Murray. Any questions for Mr. Murray? All right. Thanks again, Mr. Murray. Look forward to working with you on this in the future.
Thank you.
Yep. Mary Beth, who is next?
Mr. Chairman, we have Pete Teagan in the room.
All right, great. Pete, welcome. Please hop onto video. Good to see you again,
morning.
Pete. And please introduce yourself once again. Welcome to the committee, and we look forward to your testimony.
Thank you, Chairman. Pete Teagan with IBM's global blockchain COC team, focused entirely on our government clients, helping them take advantage of this technology. Great to speak with all of you again, and happy holidays. Before I forget that, I'm actually adjourning myself after this meeting for my holiday. But love the discussion. I'd like to really emphasize on a couple of points, maybe amplify some of the things that were already talked about, is that time for innovation. And knowing this emerging technology space, realizing that the attention is going to go wherever the easiest path is, right? So I would really encourage, as several of you have already said, Wyoming has captured a lot of attention right now, and it is uniquely poised for the convergence of all these different factors for that acceleration. I'd say don't waste that moment, right? Sooner is better than later, and faster is better than perfect. I would say that. So get started with something, and then design and iterate as you go from there. I would say that's an important step. And then I think it was Senator Nethercott's point about the digitization of the court system, the judicial system. And that's funny because that is spot on to how we have viewed a project that Wyoming has been envisioning. It's a stepping stone to a much larger overall digital transformation across the state, right? It's not just the Secretary of State's office or the filing systems, but when it's not just the court system, but it's how all of these systems interact. And that speaks a little bit to the importance of the API as well. It's about scaling, and it's about digitally enabling all of these siloed systems to interact with each other. And I think that's where you really get a lot of the benefit that we're talking about here. Love the idea about the innovative vehicle to get something started. Of course, you know, my personal interest in helping the state of Wyoming. I think that would be a very interesting venture to be a part of. We've managed partnerships like that before. You know, there's a lot of moving parts, a lot of different viewpoints, and I think it takes someone that really understands the government space as well as the technology space to really make that all happen and pull it together. And with that, happy to entertain any new questions that might have come up.
Excellent. Thanks, Pete. Appreciate it. Questions for Mr. Tigan?
And Chairman, if I may,
ahead.
while you've solicited questions, the other point I wanted to mention is for potential funding sources. You know, a lot of the CARES Act funding has been bantered around as different ways of funding digital transformation. And since one of the core intents of a lot of the CARES Act funding is for state revenue recovery and enhancement or expansion, I would really encourage us all to consider that as another funding path, or maybe a additional funding path to get this started sooner than later.
Good point. Thank you, Mr. Tigan. Questions for Mr. Tigan? Pete, I have a question about, again, the concept, the traditional system that we were looking at through this legislation is, let's do an RFP, let's try and figure out who can do this work and move it forward. It seems, based on what we've been hearing today and even building up, I would say, over the last few meetings, that might not be the best process, that we might be able to get something up and running just through partnership, teamwork, collaborating with the university, and just trying to build a team that can hack this out. What are your thoughts on that approach?
Agree 100%. You know, we've worked both ways. Obviously, we do a ton of work in the traditional government procurement channels, and that does have its merits. Certainly, you want to do everything properly, but as some of the others have spoken out before, it sometimes precludes innovation, and it precludes speed. So if we can find that happy balance, and that's where I think we'd bring some value to this table here.
Excellent. Thank you so much, Mr. Tigan. Any further questions? All right. Seeing none, well, I think we'll then be back in touch. I like this idea that's forming, and I think you'd be a valuable part of that team. So I look forward to working with you on this as we get through the holidays and try and get this up and rolling as quickly as we can.
Great. Thank you all.
Thanks, Pete. Mary Beth.
Mr. Chairman, I believe Brendan Mayer is next.
All right. Brendan, come on down. There he is. Mr. Mayor, welcome. Please introduce yourself once again for the day, and happy to see you again. Share your thoughts.
Yes, thank you very much. Can everyone hear me?
We can.
Great. Thank you, Chairman Rothfuss. Committee members, my name is Brendan Marr. I am an MIT Media Lab alumnus and computer scientist. And I'd like to say a few brief words to help with Representative Lindholm's construct of being able to run the ball. There are a lot of wonderful ideas here, and I want to go back to a few constructs that might be helpful to think about in the back of your minds. And that would be, first, one of the things that enabled the banknote and the prevalence of paper money to develop was the Bank of England requiring taxes to be paid in banknotes. And you could actually do the same kind of thing with paying for taxes for filings in forms of cryptocurrency. And that would actually drive the ecosystem to Wyoming. one of the other things that is really important to understand is when we use the term APIs, to also simultaneously use the term protocols. To understand the significance of this, I point you to a small industry we call the financial industry. The financial industry is successful in part because it is built on something called a wire transfer protocol. So the financial industry has at its base level not a way of communicating through APIs, which are higher level, but at a lower level, which are based on protocols. So I urge you, when you use the term API, that you also use the term protocol, because what that will do is open up the floodgates to the other half of the market. And this idea of markets is very important. And it gets to a few things that were mentioned here, which is the idea that Wyoming is actually dealing with two different markets. They're dealing with the traditional markets for a business registration, and they're dealing with all of the business registrations that are potentially available in the DeFi and crypto space. So these are two different markets, and they operate on two different protocols. So if you want to open the floodgates for vast numbers of people to come in, then you have to be allowing an API and also allowing interaction by protocols. So those are the two things that I think are very important. But I would also like to say that I think that the idea that who was, if I have his name right, Mr. Stravessen had expressed is to the point. And it is that there's an army of people and entities out there that will pay for this. And this really can be, in your words, hacked out. There will be a number of people and entities that will gladly build this out for you, provided that they have access to the state system in a formal way. So, and there's one final note that I think is extraordinarily important in all this. And Mr. If I have his name right, Srinivasan. Srinivasan.
There you go.
And he threw out some rather large numbers. And I wish he was on the line, but I think it is something to flesh out. And I corroborate with him the numbers of, thousands of registrations. And what Wyoming needs to do is they need to solve, and I've said this before, the Series LLC naming problem, because there are, let's say, billions of registrations that can occur, micro registrations of small apps with smart contracts that can occur and be embodied in Series LLC. But they can't do that if we don't have a form and a protocol for doing that. So I concur with him that there's a vast market for this and a vast opportunity for the Wyoming state to put forth legislation and then programmatically determine the rates that it will receive as revenue for these registrations. That's all I have to say at the moment.
Thank you, Mr. Marr. Appreciate it. Good points. And committee questions for Mr. Marr. All right. Thank you, Mr. Marr. And we'll again we'll follow up. It seems like we're going to end up with some sort of little group working on this and bringing in your ideas, what you think the key apps are. I think that you're right with regard to trying to make sure that we can appropriately link in crypto. And I think this is something that Representative Lindholm has championed for a number of years as well, of trying to get the state to basically acknowledge a cryptocurrency or multiple cryptocurrencies allow you to pay for things and engage with the state, which I do think would be something that we would make sure that this was certainly in the beginning built with an architecture that would support, and then we can try and get to the point where that is an enabling feature. That's a good point. Thank you for that. Additional questions for Mr. Marr? All right, thank you, Mr. Marr. Great to see you again, and appreciate all of your continued hard work on this in support of the select committee as well. Mary Beth, do we have anyone else?
Mr. Chairman, we do not.
Okay, thanks, Mary Beth. All right, then let's close public testimony and head back to the Secretary of State's office for a second. Let's get back to our conversation. Deputy Wheeler and Ms. Janes, what do you think about this concept that's kind of coalescing around? Maybe we can put together a team with Secretary of State's office, some of your IT folk that know how the system works, what needs to be done, some of these experts, and really build a group that can just get this done and figure out what the needs are, what the best technology is. It seems like we've got a lot of goodwill support, and goodwill support honestly is a lot better than appropriated support when it's of the quality of goodwill that we seem to have.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I enjoy listening to the conversation. It's wonderful ideas. You've got a lot of expertise out there. That being said, I will say that Section 4 of the bill, where it does talk about, in essence, the RFP to conduct a feasibility study of the filing system, that is the concept that Secretary Buchanan brought to you in the September meeting. And quite honestly, if we're going to go down a different road, I really need to talk to him before I can agree or say no. So, and I certainly will talk to him. But yes, I mean, you've got the experts out there, and I appreciate the conversation. I've got a notebook full of notes that I'm taking and names and everything, but I do need to talk to him.
Yep, understood. Now that makes perfect sense, Deputy. And you know what I'm inclined to do is this is obviously the last meeting of the 65th. We'll have to maybe just have some opportunity to visit and sit down with the secretary and talk this through. I don't want to abandon the previous path because it was a path that we worked together on. But I think it's worth exploring this alternative path, which might be a better one for all of us. So let's find some time then over the, we've got a challenging scheduling opportunity for the next, let's say, week or so. But beyond that, let's find some time to visit on that. I think that would be a useful opportunity to sit down with the secretary and talk through how we might be able to take advantage of all this goodwill.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Yep. Representative Lindholm.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. My question for the Secretary of State's office was one of the biggest things that I heard out of one of our folks testifying was that he thinks that he can round up the cash just to make it happen and do it on a goodwill type of situation. Do you need, if something like that were to happen and the Secretary of State's office was interested in doing it, and you just had some folks show up, some engineers ready to build it towards your wish, didn't cost the state a thing, do you even need the legislature to do anything? Can you cover that unto yourself? Is that a thing that you'd be able to contemplate?
Ms. Wheeler, Deputy Wheeler, excuse me.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, Representative Lindholm. That's a really great question. And Director James and I were actually talking about that as the conversation was going on. I don't know. It is something that I definitely will look into. It's a unique situation and opportunity.
Deputy Wheeler, that was one of the reasons why, as we were talking about this, I contemplated involving the university, because if the university is involved, maybe the state agency aspect of the university can make that door open so that it becomes an easier path to walk. But again, I don't know either. So I think we're going to have to explore what we can and can't do with and without statutory change. I think Representative Lindholm's exactly onto a key question is how can we proceed? But it would be great if we can just make it happen, and we don't need to pass a bill. That would be spectacular.
Yes, Mr. Chairman.
Representative Lindholm, follow up. You good? All right. Committee, any other questions or discussion with the Secretary of State's office? All right. Seeing none, thank you very much. And again, we'll see what we do with the bill, but please stick around for just a couple more minutes as we're working on this topic. And Mary Beth, we're done with public testimony. So committee, let's close public testimony. We do have a bill draft, and I'll just share my thoughts on having the bill draft. I think it's good to have a bill draft that has a title that would allow us to do some work in this space, even if it's not the bill draft that we necessarily want. If it's not perfect, I think it would be handy to have it as a vehicle if we end up having a quick legislative session and we need to make some appropriations, some changes, something to do with structure. So I think it would be useful to still take action on it, although I'm hopeful we don't use it, to be quite honest. I mean, my preference would be that this other path that we've just explored is the path that we end up taking, if we can get there. What's the rest of the committee's thoughts? The other thing we can do with this bill, incidentally, is allow, if we amend it, we can get to Representative Lindholm's concept about trying to use some of the money for marketing purposes and provide additional flexibility that I know would take an act of legislation that isn't in place. Thoughts, committee? Senator Nethercott, up. You double unmuted, which is a mute.
I was on it today. So, I'm still fixated on the court situation. Can we amend this bill?
Yep. I
prefer the money went to the Chancery Court.
For a filing system, or just hand them this money?
Both.
Okay. We have that.
Only because that's the greater need right now with limited resources.
It does. Okay. My concern there, Senator Nethercott, is that doesn't bring in new revenue. It is a good need. This other one, there's a world of support that wants to program it, and then you can steal it for the Chancery Court and for the courts, but it doesn't go in the other direction, I don't think. I don't think anyone is going to swoop down upon Wyoming because they want our court system more streamlined.
They do. So that's the whole purpose of the Chancery Court, right? It has, the filing fee is significantly higher than it would be in a traditional court. And the reason why we can justify such a high filing fee, if you recall, the original draft version of the bill had a $1,000 filing fee. I mean, really unheard of. The federal court system has a $400 filing fee for litigation, and our state courts, it's like $140. I don't know, every year they want to raise it. So that's where it's at. But we had $1,000 for the Chancery Court. And the reason why that's a reasonable amount for the Chancery Court was because you have sophisticated parties that can afford that filing fee, and they're willing to pay for an expedited resolution as opposed to protracted years-long litigation in a state court system, or even the federal system that's bogged down with criminal hearings and other types of nonsense. Very important to the issue of justice, however. So the Chancery Court is worth that filing fee. And so potentially, it could be a revenue maker if we, identified some portion of that filing fee to go for whatever you want it to go for. But it certainly is a revenue generator because it creates Wyoming to be a place to do business for, and it goes hand in hand with our LLC concept.
Well, I don't disagree on the value of the Chancery Court. I've supported that all along, and I love the Chancery Court. I'm just saying, from the business proposition for somebody like Mr. Srinivasan, which one do they want to come to Wyoming and throw their capital at as the first app? It seems like the corporate filing system's the first app they love, and then they love your second app. They want that as the spinoff instead of the other spinoff approach. I'm just suggesting that. I don't know.
I'm always second string.
You are first string. This is the first string committee right here. This is it. All right. Yeah. Representative Lindholm, come on. Representative Lindholm, what do you think? What's the path forward with this bill? And we need to draw some people back in to vote on the bill if we're going to, because half of our legislators are in other meetings right now.
Thanks, Mr. Chairman. I think, ultimately move the ball forward. I think the concept unto itself of the Secretary of State's office gathering up some of its own coin that it makes and doing some advertising is great unto itself. And then I'm hopeful that we hear back from the Secretary of State's office that indeed, yeah, they could accept a donation to build this and any and all kind of help, where we could effectively just kill half the bill and then keep the bill moving forward. That sets a certain amount of their return to be going towards an advertising aspect. I think that's double plus good.
I think that's the best feature of it, honestly, is trying to get that in. That's an excellent idea, Representative. Well, we need honestly, we need more legislators here. Chairman Olson and Representative Greer are both actually on, and I know they're a part of this, but I think they both. Chairman Olson is simultaneously in another meeting, and I think this is when Representative Greer had a business phone call, so he was watching but can't engage.
I can get Ogden back. Mr.
Yeah,
Chairman.
we need to get Senator Driscoll from his meeting as well. Let's just pause. If it's okay with the committee, let's push pause on this for a little while. Let's try and bring them back in. We'll take action on it in a little while. Go ahead, Representative Lindell.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chairman. I think by the time, if we message them now, we can go ahead and work the bill. By the time they get back, we should be ready for a vote. We don't. Really
I don't think we've got sufficient quorum legislatively to amend even. And if that's what we're doing for working the bill, well, I think it'll take 2 minutes. Let's ping them. Let's take a break and let's come back. It's break time anyway. So let's come back at 10:10 and get them here for a 10:10 work the bill. How's that? All right. So let's see everybody back at 10:10 and let's try and get our legislators to focus on this for a few minutes at 10:10. So please mute and stop. All right, folks, let's come back on. There's Senator Driscoll. Good deal. How you doing, Senator Driscoll?
There we go.
There you go. Howdy.
Oh, somehow I managed to get two screens up of you. So I couldn't find my mute unmute button.
No worries. We can hear you now. Excellent.
Now we're
All
trying
right. Mr. Reville, Mr. Kaufman, and Representative Greer, if you're out there, come on and join in and we'll start working this commercial filing system bill. There's Mr. Kaufman. Good deal. All right. So we are on 21 LSO, 27 working draft 0.6 commercial filing system update. We've had some good testimony. As I mentioned, I think it's valuable for us to keep this bill alive as a vehicle. We've had a few different discussions maybe on how we could try and expand this bill. So we've got some options with marketing and possibly options with regard to Chancery Court if we want to throw some language in so that the title is broad enough. I think that's all reasonable. But at the end of the day, I think there's some great opportunities outside of this bill that would be more attractive. But with that, I'd entertain a motion on the bill if anyone would like to make one. Representative Lindholm
Moved.
has moved it. Is there a second? Co-Chairman Olson has provided the second. Any opening discussion before we move through the bill? All right. Seeing none, let's walk through the bill and look for amendments, whether specific or conceptual. Any amendments on page 1? Any amendments on page 2? Any amendments on page 3? Go ahead, Mr. Kaufman.
Sorry, Mr. Chairman, I'm slow. Just a thought I'm throwing out was from Mr. Marr about, potentially broadening the API language. And that is not my area of expertise, but I get super concerned about overly restrictive language when it comes to the application of certain technologies. So just something I wanted to raise the issue on.
Thank you, Mr. Kaufman. So computer software intermediary, which allows two distinct software applications to interact. Okay. And again, we can revisit that if we need to expand it later, so long as we've got something which is reasonably appropriate right now if it's a vehicle. So that's a good point, though. We heard about the concept of protocol being included, and that might be valuable. Anything else on page 3? Go ahead, Representative Lindholm.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I wonder if we could just make a simple amendment on the API definition. Instead of it saying means a computer software intermediary which allows two distinct software applications to interact, I think you just clean it up by saying 2 or more.
Yeah, Representative Lindholm. Okay, I think that's rational. Is that a motion? Doesn't hurt.
Yeah, I'll make a motion in a second, or make a motion, and then we'll see if we get a second.
Is there a second? Get a second? motion and a second. Any discussion? Go ahead, Representative.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chairman. I guess I don't know if that would clean up the situation unto itself. So I don't know if we've still got the ability to talk with Mr. Mayor, but.
Well, I don't think that does any harm. And we could even, if it was a friendly amendment, Representative, means a computer software intermediary or protocol, which allows two or more distinct software applications to interact. That gets the protocol concept also. And I think that expands a little bit, particularly since it's an or. Can never go wrong with an or. That's probably not true. Senator Nethercott, no. All right, is that friendly? So we've got a motion to amend. Application programming interface means a computer software intermediary or protocol which allows two or more distinct software applications to interact. Further discussion? Seeing none. All those in favor, raise your hand. Those opposed? Motion carries unanimously. All right. Any further amendments on page 3? On to page 4. Any amendments on page 4? Seeing none. Amendments on page 5. Go ahead, Representative Lindholm.
Yeah, thanks, Mr. Chairman. And I don't know what page this is going to go on. So we're talking a very LSO is going to get all the leeway and reign they could possibly want. But what my amendment would do for this bill, and this would include page 1 also, because I imagine we're expanding the title significantly. But this would provide essentially the same language that we currently have, the appropriation of the $2,250,000 from the corporate filing computer system account.
Yep.
We would appropriate, and this is a WAG. I don't know what it's actually. Can I ask the Secretary of State something real quick?
Absolutely. Go ahead, Representative Lindholm. We'll allow that.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Madam Deputy, what was the cost for your advertising for the election that you did on Facebook?
Madam Deputy Secretary?
Mr. Chairman, Representative Lindholm, we were limited. It was CARES Act funding. So we spent, I believe, a total of almost $190,000.
Thank you, Deputy. So what do you want that number to be, Representative Lindholm?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. That was specifically targeting, the way I understand it, that was specifically targeting Wyoming residents. That's fairly cheap for the campaign unto itself, but it still inundated us. So the idea would be to inundate non-Wyoming residents. I mean, not that it's not important to advertise to our Wyoming residents that they can start a business. Of course that is. However, we're targeting, I would suspect we would want to target large areas of tech firms and whatnot, i.e. Silicon Valley and those types of folks. So my motion would be for $1 million to come from the corporate filing computer system account for the purpose of advertising Wyoming business registration use.
Gotcha. And providing broad flexibility to the Legislative Service Office to make that language work as a new paragraph, right? This is a new paragraph D or something like that. Is that your concept?
Right. And so, Mr. Chairman, the rest of the motion would also be, I mean, we'd have to amend on page 4 under section 4 where we, where that tip over happens in 2021. We would raise that by $1 million. So you'll see on section 4, starting on line 6 through 9, it talks about how we're going to appropriate $2,250,000 or $2,500,000. So now that would be $3,500,000 because we've got an additional $1 million that'll be used for the purpose of advertising our corporate filing system.
Excellent. All right. Is there a second? Got a second from Chairman Olson. Got a motion to increase from 2.5 million in section 4 to a total of 3.5 million. Remember, all of this is already collected by the Secretary of State's office for corporate filings, and deploy 1 million of that for advertising and marketing purposes in a fashion that is similar to the language that we see in paragraph C as a new paragraph D. Is there any questions or discussion?
Mr. Chairman,
Go ahead.
I would just want to make sure what LSO understands the intent of the amendment and that they have free reign to make it work.
Absolutely. Mr. Hopkinson, are you comfortable with understanding of the concept here?
Mr. Chairman, I think so. And with that free reign, I can make sure that the language is going to accomplish what it needs to.
Perfect. Thank you, Mr. Hopkinson. All right. Any further discussion or debate? Go ahead, Representative.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I also thought about maybe putting in some language that consult with the Wyoming Department of Tourism, because they've already got contracts all over the United States. But I don't think we need to do that. Honestly, I think it probably just convolutes things. And I think the Secretary of State's office will probably do that regardless, to see if they can utilize some of those resources if needed.
Yeah, I think so. Fair enough. I'd like to just briefly, Deputy Wheeler, any thoughts on how we've structured this amendment? Is there a better way? We're doing it on the fly a little bit. Anything else that you'd say, hey, it'd be better if you did this?
Mr. Chairman, I think the way that you are doing it on the fly is just perfect.
Yeah, I felt that way too. Thank you, Deputy Wheeler. All right. Any
Question on the
other?
amendment.
All right, we got a question. All those in favor, please raise your hand.
Best amendment ever.
Those opposed, raise your hand. Motion is carried unanimously. Nicely done. Nicely done. All right, Representative Greer has joined us. Welcome. All right, we are on page 5, Representative Greer, of the draft, going through 21 LSO 27 working draft 0.6. We just had an amendment to add some funds for marketing that were not otherwise available at the request of the Secretary of State's office to this draft. And we still have an opening for motions to amend. We're on page 5. Any further motions? Go ahead, Mr. Co-Chairman. Were you voting over here, Mr. Co-Chairman, or were you voting over there?
I was voting in appropriations.
Okay.
Was there a vote?
No, you did great. I thought
You thought I
I
was-
thought you were trying to amend something, but you're not. All right. All right.
Mr. Chairman, the only amendment's been regarding marketing.
That is correct.
Bill draft. Thank you.
Yep. All right. Any further amendments? Senator Nethercott, do you have any ideas on how to flow some money towards a project to enable chancery courts? Representative Lindholm.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chairman. Just a small correction. We did have another amendment for Representative.
Oh, we did.
Greer's.
My apologies. Yep. Please point that out.
Yeah, Mr. Chairman, that's under the definition of API, application programming interface. We just added or more after 2.
Okay.
So 2 or more distinct software applications to interact. And that covers the issue that was brought up by Mr. Mayor in regards to API program. We don't want a limiting function, expansive as possible.
Yeah. Sorry about that, Representative Greer. I forgot that one.
No, that's fine. Thank you. Sorry, I had to go.
No, totally understand. And Representative Greer, Senator Nethercott, one thing we're doing with this bill is we're trying to provide a vehicle. This is the discussion we had, and you probably heard some of it, but I know that you were participating in a call for some of it. We're trying to provide a vehicle that enables some of the ideas that we've discussed in testimony, and one of those is trying to make sure that we have resources available if we want to take a system like this and enable the court filing as well. And that was one thing we were contemplating. And again, it's more about expanding the title so we could do that if we wanted to than it is about anything else. We could put $1 in, and at that point in time, we'd have a title that would allow us to contemplate funding a court filing system for the Chancery Court to expedite that using profits off of this. But we certainly couldn't do it right now. So Senator Nethercott, what are your thoughts?
Well, Representative Greer, while I have you listening, and Mr. Kaufman, I mean, you heard my concerns. I mean, when we heard the testimony from Mr. Balaji's, you know, what I heard was he knows people with talent who are willing to give it time and talent for free, potentially, to effectuate a system that would be so similar to a court filing system, an electronic court filing system, that we should take advantage of that opportunity that is appearing in front of us out of the great need that Wyoming has to develop this, not only for our state system, as a conversation's been going on for years, but in relationship to our Chancery Court, and really making that nexus associated with all the work we've done on this committee, recognizing the current financial challenges the state is in. You know, how do we pivot with this or take this forward, recognizing it's the same skill set from the, you know, engineers and software developers, the API developers. And I do think the revenue generation is there that can be associated with it. But I don't want to lose the scope of this bill and everyone's excitement about business filings. So I don't want to complicate the issues or conflate the issues, but I do see them being very similarly related. I don't want to lose what I think is potentially more critical to the advancing work we've done, which is having a Chancery Court that allows these global entities to access our court system.
Representative Greer, thoughts?
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chairman. So I'm going to also be very curious of Matt's comments, and I just want to understand Senator Nethercott's. If I'm tying this together, and I may not be following very well, but again, with the difficulties in the 20 plus years of trying to get to a court filing system, okay, we now have the Chancery Court, which one of the selling points, and Matt was on that call when we met in Casper initially to try to get this sold to the judiciary, was, look, this is a great court to beta test something that might work better in the regular court system. But as now we're going to pivot to not having, but filing through, I mean, this is what it looks like, is we're going to be filing through now the district court clerks again. That opportunity to beta test really isn't there. So what we're back now is just relying upon a streamlining or modified rules that streamline, quite frankly, the motion practice and discovery practice. So as your question again is, how do we, if we're going down this path with filing business entities, is there a parallel path that ought to be followed or looked at with respect to court filings, in particular the Chancery Court? Am I hearing okay? Sorry, I'm shifting gears here.
Nope, totally understand. Thank you, Representative Greer. That's exactly it. And we heard good testimony, and Senator Nethercott asked some questions of some experts in this realm that really understand what this architecture would look like. And it seemed like it was not a heavy lift going from a corporate filing system to a judicial filing system with a similar architecture, because again, your filing, like UCC filing system, is going to be similar. And I can tell you, I'm already getting back channel email from folks that are these architects that are saying, yeah, this is a good idea. So,
Mr. Chairman, and then back to question maybe to Senator Nethercott. You know, I mean, I know the struggles. I was on JAC when we came back and pushed more money to the Supreme Court. We continue to do that. I got a nice long email from prior Speaker Love now regarding the filing system and proposed rules the other day, which still seem a bit cumbersome. But what it I guess asks this question is, because Chancery Courts can give us opportunities to do things that aren't going to get done in civil court and probate court and criminal court. Is it something, if we're able to do this with corporate filings, you just have a separate system set up that is just for the Chancery Court, and let that run, and then let the judges, the clerks, the attorneys say, oh, hey, that does work pretty well. Why don't we go ahead and blow this up? Is that kind of where you're thinking, or?
I think it's a cool idea. Senator Nethercutt, go ahead.
Yeah. So look, devastating transformation in the Wyoming judicial system, right, as a result of not being able to stand up truly an independent chancery court. Yeah, everyone's in agreement on that. But that kind of is what it is at this point. I refuse to give up on that fight, just kind of put it on pause for a minute. The chancery court will fail as a result of the need for a global fintech company to have to call your local county clerk and UPS over their filing, which might get there in a week. Business cannot transact that way, and the legal system is part of business. But that is the current reality. That is not acceptable, particularly in light of what this committee has done. Not accepting that reality, we have been blessed with talent that appeared an hour ago in front of us that has an interest of creating these systems. And I don't see a significant fundamental difference between creating a business filing system as opposed to a court filing system. Just name the document something different. But the skill set associated with creating the system should be the same, I think. And so why we can't use that interest in our state paired with the talent that's just appeared with us and move that forward, I think is important. As we know, our Supreme Court has had an electronic filing system for that specific court. And that has worked acceptably. So why we couldn't do that with the Chancery Court as its own piece, and those judges who are selected to serve on that court, get trained on how to access it. I think they can manage that. And if they can't, then maybe they shouldn't be on the court. But that should be easily done and something that can be managed. And our legislation originally with the creation of that court said it needed to have an e-filing system associated with it. So, I don't know where that conversation currently sits, but I'm sure it's not good.
Yeah.
Thank you, Senator. Any further thoughts, Representative Greer?
No, Mr. Chairman, no, I agree. And while I'm not practicing law anymore, I just never could understand it. And it sounds like there may be a solution right there. And I like the fact that Senator Nethercott's passionate about it, because she's absolutely right. I mean, and it still drives me, I never could understand how I can access a federal court anywhere in this country, a bankruptcy court anywhere in this country, file anything there at my computer, but yet I have to walk documents over to the courthouse, hand them to the clerk to make sure I got the right amount of copies and I bow just right and everything happens just right. It is mind-boggling. And it will, quite frankly, make the Chancery Court fail. I agree with that comment. If we do not have electronic filing system, our Chancery Court will not succeed. I agree.
All right. Further thoughts, Mr. Reville?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. And Representative Greer, without that, the corporate filing opportunity will not exist in a meaningful way.
Yep, agreed. Again, all puzzle pieces. We need all the pieces, and it's a challenge to get them all through. But I think we need every last one of these things we've been discussing. Mr. Kaufman, anything to add?
No, I'm not really, Mr. Chairman. I'm in agreement and sympathetic with everything that's being said. I mean, the one caveat I would make is, firms like ours think the best thing that ever happened to filing was COVID, because it required all the county clerks to accept email filings. And that's been the biggest advancement in court filings in decades in Wyoming. So just that alone was a tremendous advancement this past year. But no, I'm sympathetic. I agree. I slightly disagree. I'm not convinced that the Chancery Court will fail without electronic filings, because every court system in the country outside of the federal system has a lot of problems with filing, and filing is cumbersome in most courts. I 100% agree, though, anything we could do to streamline that. And if there is an opportunity for engagement with an industry player to bring a solution, let's do it. I'm in 100% agreement with that. So yeah, I think anything we can do to make this process accessible and instantaneous is a huge win.
All right. Well, it seems like we're all in adamant agreement on this, and I think it's appropriate then to have an amendment of an E paragraph where, honestly, again, we would amend this through the process if we work this through the process in the session. I don't know that the specific dollar matters very much at this point in time, but we would need it in the title. We would need it there so that we can work through it. And I think similar to what Representative Lindholm just did of mirroring the language in paragraph C and amending the total in paragraph A for an additional budgeted program out of this account is appropriate. So I think that's a reasonable construct if we want to go that route. Is there a proposed amendment to do that? Senator Nethercott, go ahead.
So moved.
All right, we've got an amendment. Is there a second? We got a second. All right, so the motion is to add an E paragraph. Senator, how many dollars would you like to start with? Doesn't really matter, but pick a number.
It's just a placeholder, right?
Yep.
$1 million.
Perfect. All right. We've got a motion to add an E paragraph to provide $1 million from the corporate filing computer system account that we've created above, amend paragraph A up by $1 million for accumulation of those funds. And these funds would be directed towards a continuation of the project described in C to provide a judicial filing system for the Chancery Court, as I understand it, for the Chancery Court. All right, we've got a motion and a second. Representative Lindholm, go ahead.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I don't disagree that the two are intertwined. That the success of the filing system at the Chancery Court will depend on them having this filing system. However, I don't think it's entirely appropriate to be doing a tip over from the Secretary of State directly over for a filing system at the judiciary. Now, if we wanted to do a tip over from some other type of filing that the Supreme Court takes in, then absolutely I would be in favor of that. That makes sense. But as it stands right now, I'm not supporting this.
Thank you, Representative Lindholm. Go ahead, Senator Nethercott.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I don't support a tip over either. It can be self-funded with the courts. So, I mean, remember, you can't, just like you can't access the Secretary of State's office without a filing fee, you can't access the court without a filing fee too. These are parallel filing systems, right, that are connected in subjects.
Okay. Senator Nethercott, as the motion is constructed, it would be money coming from corporate filings to fund the Chancery Court extension. And to be perfectly honest, I am 100% comfortable with that because we are putting in a Chancery Court system for the businesses in the state of Wyoming. And I can't imagine a better source than corporate filings. And the other side of that is we make money off of corporate filings, right? That's a revenue for the state. Court filings do not pay the bills. They pay a portion of the bills, and then we general fund those bills. So the idea that corporate filings can pay for this system, no, we're really just taking it out of the general fund at the end of the day. To me, if we want to attract businesses, we need a corporate filing system. We need a Chancery Court. And corporate filings, paying for our new corporate filing system that includes an appropriate filing system for a Chancery Court, that all fits together. To me, that's a nice picture. I'm not uncomfortable with that. Changing the structure, though, to an amendment where we used court filing fees to pay for it we would have to appropriate for that, because I don't think the court filing fees in any given year would probably, well, they would, I guess. We could intercept them on the way, but we don't make a lot off of court filing fees. Go ahead, Senator Ducat.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I mean, just as a point here, and I don't want to get in the way of it if the committee supports the Secretary of State doing it, I don't care. But the Delaware Chancery Court has become a court that's, abused its reputation. So in order to file any so you do the initial filing fee, and I don't even know what it is in Delaware anymore, and then filing additional motions thereafter, there's a fee to file those too. So it's these additional fees that are collected for every filing. Now, I don't suggest that that's necessarily the way to go, because if anything can be learned, that that's not working very well for Delaware, and they've outfeed themselves. But there are other ways to generate revenue for the Chancery Court. And remember, our other courts don't generate revenue because those are really, that's access to justice issues, right? They're not the sophisticated business litigation where the litigants can pay to play, right? And that's really what you're doing in that Chancery Court. And our other courts are there to manage, other issues, and therefore it costs less, and it's access to another branch of government.
Definitely.
So I just think that there is opportunity for the court to generate more revenue, which we didn't do because we gave it away for free the first time again, but we'll fix it.
I totally agree, Senator Ducat. I'm just concerned with where enough money would come from if we went with the current model. Go ahead, Representative Greer.
Mr. Cook, why don't you go take the co-chair, because he's kind of.
Yep, sorry about that. I think he's looking at us this time. Co-Chairman Olson.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chairman. I just trying to appeal to Representative Lindholm to reconsider that thought, just to pile on a little bit. I don't think it's that unusual for money to go from, if you think about it, going from the executive over here in this agency over into the judiciary budget. The reverse takes place in the judiciary. From the judiciary, just think of your speeding tickets as examples. There's a portion of that goes to school foundation, for example. So I don't know that it's that inappropriate or uncommon for branches money to cross back and forth. I think a lot's been said about the nexus as a whole between the corporate filings and the growth of the Chancery Court and back and forth and how they'll grow each other. I just want to point out, I don't think it's that uncommon to go between the branches. So I think there's at least an argument to be made. All that being said, I do think Representative Lindholm raises a point that's going to consistently come up with this bill, which is just that. I just think we have to be ready to respond to the fact that what is the nexus and that it's not that unusual.
Yeah. Thank you, Co-Chairman Olson. And again, I think honestly, just having it in the title, if this is a concern, I'm not averse to fixing it if it's better out of court fees or something along those lines, by all means. But we have to be allowed to work in that space. Representative Greer, go ahead.
Okay, well, thank you. So, Mr. Chairman and committee, this bill, and I did get to watch the last time this went through House Appropriations. I got to sit behind Representative Lindholm and snicker at him as he was getting butchered. So this bill is putting forth an idea, but let's not kid ourselves. We're intercepting money out of a fund, okay, or a revenue stream. Well, that revenue stream's directly into the general fund. So we just will talk in terms of it as general fund dollars. Okay. Now, the discussions that we've had regarding that this is good because we are reinvesting to be able to make that generation of income greater is a good argument and something that we need to push forward with. So you bring the nexus, as mentioned by Chairman Olson, in terms of the Chancery Court is that enhancement to help with the corporate filings. We'll stimulate it, we'll grow it, we'll make this and create a cottage industry with it. To Mr. Kaufman's point, maybe the Chancery Court doesn't die, but legislators need to be dramatic when we're selling our points. Okay. but that being said, the fact of the matter is, while it may be true that fees can sustain a system in the future, and maybe the fees, as we are looking at an enhanced filing fee, and if there are fees associated with filing motions and so forth, can get to a point where it can support the Chancery Court and pay for future investments and enhancements, that would be a great place to be. But the initial cost of standing this up is going to have to be borne out of the general fund. Okay. What we're saying is that we're going to go ahead and tie that nexus together and pay for it by what is generating that revenue source associated with it, with the filings here. And so I think this is a very good discussion. I think this bill's, probably come out of this committee and have a good look and create some good discussion points. But it does have to survive, and trust me, the appropriations committees of each chamber will have fun with this one.
Representative Lindholm.
Yeah. Thanks, Mr. Chairman. And I think it is a good discussion. I mean, we talk about that nexus between the two, and certainly I think everybody can recognize that nexus and how they are tied kind of hand in hand. And I would just remind the members how often we've stood together to reject whenever somebody tries to tie something that is returning investment to the state of Wyoming directly to the school foundation account. We've seen that time and time again. We saw it with corporate filings. I think in 2017 or 18, we saw it. We've seen it multiple times, and we reject that. And the reason why we always reject that is because that's why we've got appropriators. We're the legislative branch. This is what we do. This is why we got an appropriations committee. And so they're going to appropriate it. They will, and it will most likely come out of the general fund. But I think it's a different animal when we're looking at within an agency, making that agency better, that the funds they're already getting in, we just put a stop on a little bit of it and say, all right, go ahead and build your infrastructure, make more money, go forth and flourish, versus this automatic kick over to another agency in statute. That's a rough gig. I might feel a little bit better about it if there's a cutoff date. I don't know. I probably wouldn't. Let the appropriators appropriate. This goes from one agency to another.
All right. Any further discussion? Okay, we're on the amendment to add the E paragraph for providing an additional $1 million for Chancery Court. Mr. Hopkinson, do you understand that concept?
Mr. Chairman, if I could just get a little bit more clarification. Yep. The amendment kind of discussed basing it off of what's in paragraph C, and that has a lot of references back to specifically the corporate filing system that's created in section 1. So I guess if the committee could help me out as far as what's intended, are we just giving money to the Chancery Court straight up for the purposes of developing a filing system? Is the committee's intent to create a separate or have language similar to what's in section 1 apply to the Chancery Court as well? I'm just a little unclear on that.
Thank you. Go ahead, Senator Nethercutt.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. So, Mr. Hopkinson, I think probably to add further clarification to my motion, jump in if anybody wants to. So there's appropriated $1 million from the corporate filing account of the Office of the Secretary of State to be used in accordance with the Chancery Court's e-filing system as required by the statute reference. And then all other provisions of the paragraph C, as you indicated, remain the same. There's no study to be conducted here. I don't know if we want to keep a study.
There's no study needed.
So we can strike the study reference, and then reference it back to this committee in consultation with the Select Committee on Blockchain Financial Technology for the purposes of developing and implementing the e-filing system described in the Act as referenced in the Chancery Court Act. That should be sufficient.
All right. Any further questions, Mr. Hopkinson?
No, Mr. Chairman, I think that does clarify that. They're kind of a separate issue. I don't know if the committee, aside when it moves on from the amendment, if it wanted to address the dates that are throughout the bill, or if we just wanted to leave that, because ultimately they may need to be amended again depending on when the legislature actually goes into session. So.
They'll definitely need to be amended again when we go into session. So I don't know that we need to spend a lot of time thinking about that. Anyone disagree? Anyone want a date amendment? I think we would just work on that. Okay. All right. Any further discussion on this motion? Seeing none, all those in favor, please raise your hand. All those opposed, please raise your hand. Amendment has carried. We're back on the bill. Any discussion on the bill? Seeing none, roll call on the bill.
Mr. Chairman, this is a roll call vote on 21 LSO 27, version 6 as amended. Senator Dockstetter.
Excused.
Senator Driscoll.
Aye.
Senator Nethercott.
Aye.
Representative Greer.
Aye.
Representative Lindholm.
Aye.
Representative Yin.
Excused.
Co-Chairman Olson.
Aye.
Co-Chairman Rothfuss.
Aye. Thank you all.
Mr. Chairman,
Go ahead.
I did try to say this before we went to roll call, but I couldn't.
My apologies. Sorry about
No,
that.
no, you're. So I just say whatever house that goes to, whether it's Chairman Olson or Chairman Rothfuss carrying that, good luck. That is going to be tough in the Appropriations Committee. That the bill we had last time didn't have a quarter of that money and wasn't as a tenth of complicated. You're going to get manhandled. And so I think probably the best way to handle that, maybe moving forward as just an idea, is maybe work in regards to an amendment that you can bring them that might simplify that. Because having the different tip overs might be rough. But
thank you, Representative Lindholm. My hope is that we don't run this bill. My hope is that this alternative pathway, which has so much promise, where we have stakeholders and experts that are perfectly happy to just come to the table, do some hard work without this bill, we'll get the job done ahead of time. Representative Lindholm.
yeah, thank you, Mr. Chairman. Yeah, I think you're forgetting there's a portion of that bill that is requested by the Secretary of State in regards to advertising.
Absolutely. And all right, good point. So we don't run all of the bill. How's that?
There you go.
I wanted the parts there. I want to be able to get these objectives accomplished and have enough tools in this toolbox that we can have a bill that accomplishes that. I don't think we know what the bill is supposed to look like quite yet, but I do agree that we need to get some marketing money in there. That's a strong point, Representative Greer. I saw your hand go.
Yeah, Mr. Chairman, and I think the discussion points are good ones to have, but it probably will require a little bit of work where you're talking about a pool of money with a much smaller pool of money with a set of priorities, but direction in terms of to get the most out of it and take a little different approach than we typically do with government of, yeah, here's $1 million we need to go spend. We need to go get an RFP that comes in at $1.1 million. We need to do something different.
Agreed.
With this, definitely.
Definitely. Thank you, Representative Greer. All right. Boy, we're a little behind on this one, but this was a great conversation. I think we've got some good work here. Secretary of State's office, Deputy Wheeler, Ms. Janes, thank you so much for joining us today and for sticking with us. We really appreciate it. And yeah, I'll reach out and we'll have some more conversation and follow up with regard to how we can potentially just collaborate with the community and put something together to get a lot of this work done. I'd also ask both of you to address Representative Lindholm's question if you can, and try and figure out what we can do without statutory change and what has to be changed. And if we had a new system that was already built, could you engage with it? Those kinds of questions, and we'll discuss those later once we sort of sort that out.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you, committee. And we do have our to-do list, and we will certainly look at all of that.
Excellent. Thank you so much. Appreciate your time. Take care and have a good day.
Thank you.
All right. On to our next topic. We've got reinsurance discussion coming up. And this is an informational topic, as is the last one with Arcoin. There was some, and I'd like to bring in, okay, we've got Mr. Brooks coming in. I know he has to leave pretty soon. And Mr. Brooks, I'm very sorry for the delay in getting to this agenda item. We had a good and important discussion that was ahead of you, and it was unfortunate that we ended up taking a little bit more time than we expected. But I am excited about this reinsurance discussion. We had an opportunity to visit a few weeks ago on this topic. University of Wyoming President Seidel made this introduction and connection, and he was contemplating how it might be of benefit for us to understand a little bit more about opportunities regarding reinsurance in Wyoming, with some potential statutory changes in the future, that little tweaks that might be handy, as well as the utilization of a lot of these financial technology statutory changes and advancements with digital assets that we've been engaged in. So with that, welcome, Mr. Brooks. Please introduce yourself to the committee, and the floor is yours.
Well, thank you. And it's nice to meet all of you. And I've been watching the YouTube session on the Chancery Court. I think a lot of this work will lend itself to the opportunity to bring reinsurance to the state. My background is reinsurance. I have recently moved back to Wyoming permanently. I had been a part-time resident of Wyoming, a part-time resident of Bermuda, where I ran a Bermuda reinsurance company. And the pandemic stopped the freedom of travel, and so I chose Wyoming. And as soon as I got back to Wyoming, I had lunch with Dr. Seidel one day, and he asked for ideas around how can we bring financial industry to Wyoming. And my first thought was Wyoming would be the most ideal state to house reinsurance, because reinsurance is a business-to-business transaction that is most efficiently executed in a low tax-based jurisdiction, in a jurisdiction that has an entrepreneurial spirit. Bermuda certainly is that. I think Bermuda really had its success because entrepreneurs were able to go to Bermuda, execute globally in a very efficient jurisdiction. And we had a regulator who was able to be very responsive and very quick to work with the industry and had global credibility. So what we wanted to do in this introductory meeting was outline the concept of creating a Wyoming ecosystem that would support reinsurance. And we supplied to this committee just a couple days ago 3 what we're calling low-hanging fruit that would get us started. One would fit in quite well with the Chancery Court, quite frankly. And it's an idea of what we call corporate division. I'll talk about that in just a second. The second is supporting the Department of Insurance and having a reinsurance, say a reinsurance division that would quickly, for a fee, be responsive to the application and the needs of the reinsurers and the reinsurance industry. And then thirdly is just make sure that the investment guidelines under, I think it's Title 26 of the Wyoming Code, they contain best practices amongst all the global reinsurance jurisdictions in the US 50 states as governed by the National Association of Insurance Commissioners. And we can have a further conversation on all of this, but we thought that those 3 items would make for immediate interest in the reinsurance industry for housing in Wyoming. I've since come to learn that in the banking sector, and forgive me if I don't get my terminology correctly, that in the banking sector you're developing a relationship with the country of Bermuda and the Bermuda Monetary Authority under smart banks. And I think that if we could draw on that and have parallels, look, it's the Bermuda Monetary Authority that I worked with for the last close to a decade. And I know how responsive they are and how thoughtful they are. And we could transfer some of their technology to Wyoming and really expedite this process. And I hope, Senator Rothfuss, that is the introduction you were looking for, and maybe we turn it into an introduction or a discussion.
Absolutely. Thank you, Mr. Brooks. And this is, I really appreciate you coming back with this, and committee, I see this as a topic for our next interim to really find and identify the key changes that we can make to become attractive for reinsurance, and then how we can integrate a lot of our technological advancement with it. So we've got some interesting opportunity here to explore. Representative Greer, go ahead. Questions?
Yes, Mr. Chairman, I agree. So some initial questions that would just come to mind is one, is there a particular jurisdiction now that the reinsurance companies locate in? Okay, are they all organized under Delaware, or are they all in Florida? That's one question. And then two is just because of a state of domicile, what other opportunities that come with that? Is that the office building, or at least the center for the communication and some of the administrative work that goes along with that? And you know, I just got done binding my insurance for next year, and you know, it's a mess. I mean, I've got 5 different carriers at levels between 5 million, depending upon where they are on the risk scale, all the way up to $20 million increments, and it is a very interesting market, to say the least. And it really is a matter of having the backing, the investment behind it, and then a matter of analyzing risk and putting forth a product. It can be done from anywhere. So what, you know, is there a somewhere that is better? One, and two is, if you make Wyoming better, will they come? And if they come, you know, how do they come? Is it just a filing, or is it the possibility of a building with people in it?
Mr. Brooks, thoughts?
Yeah, I think it's the latter. I think it's, I think when we talk about ecosystem, I think it's take advantage of what the Wyoming legislature's already created and build on that. So I'm going to illustrate, you know, a reinsurance transaction that takes place in Wyoming would, in my mind, and this is just my vision, take place between a newly formed Wyoming reinsurance company that's probably a subsidiary of a global company. It would have some employees in the state, but what it would do is it would work with Wyoming-based bank custodians, Wyoming-based trusts. You've got a fantastic trust legislation already in place, so hopefully we could adopt that. So those trusts would hold the assets, the collateral for the reinsurance. So we would also use the banking system. So you've got the custodial system, banking system, accounting. Yes, there would be office buildings, but probably not to, you know, we probably wouldn't have huge amounts of employees inside the reinsurance companies. It would be in the ancillary services that support the transaction base. We're thinking that, you know, the way the economy of Bermuda makes its money is by requiring employees to be residing in Bermuda. So you have payroll taxes, you've got leases on homes, you're selling cars, you're doing all the things to support the economy. Here we're thinking it's either an asset tax or a transactional tax. In the Bitcoin space, I understand that you're charging basis points on assets. We could possibly do that. But it's the ideas that we create a revenue tax or a revenue system for the state.
Representative Greer, go ahead and follow up. And Representative Greer also asked I'll just point back to it, the first question of, you know, where's the best place to domicile right now and why?
Yeah,
I don't know that I have a good answer for that, because I don't know that there is a good answer for that. I mean, probably the biggest reinsurers, to the extent that they're based in the US, they're domiciled in New York, Connecticut, Illinois, California. One of the members of our team, somebody you'll meet at a later date, is the former insurance commissioner of New York. And he'll tell you that these states that have these, large insurance companies are really designed for consumer protection. And they're really designed for retail, the insurance you're talking about, retail or business to the primary. And what we're talking about here is really a business-to-business, insurance-to-insurance transaction, where the regulator needs to be more focused on solvency than consumer protection. And so I don't think a state exists that is ideal.
And I just want to echo that for a second. When I talked to Mr. Brooks about this earlier, that was a key point that I took away, is the idea that there seems to be a one-size-fits-all regulation for insurance in most states, where the storefront insurance is regulated in basically the same way that a reinsurance company is going to be. And it really does just intuitively make no sense that you would do that. A business-to-business relationship has entirely different key concepts and liquidity and solvency and all of the key concepts for the capital side on the reinsurance. Just has nothing in common with obligations to ensure that you've got marketing material that's properly labeled. And if we delineated, and you'll see, if you don't have it in front of you, we were provided a nice outline overview by Mr. Brooks, which is in the resource material for the select committee for the meeting. We've all got it, and then it's posted on the web. And that's one of the key concepts that's laid out is just by dividing it and having them treated differently, and having different departments within our insurance governance, we can have an advantage because we can have people focused on the right things. And I appreciate that point, Mr. Brooks. I think that's key. Mr. Reville.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Brooks, thank you for this interesting opportunity. I have a couple of comments and then a couple of questions. First, I think the reinsurance division is a smart thing to do. As was just pointed out, reinsurers don't face the public like normal insurance companies, and yet they're regulated the same way that those that do face the public are regulated. And speeding up the process for approvals and streamlining the regs accordingly could make a ton of sense. I guess I have a few questions, and I'll just go one at a time. So the first question is there really a federal roadblock here? Is it sort of Bermuda versus the US, and regardless of what Wyoming does, we're really not going to create that much of an opportunity?
Mr. Brooks, go ahead. Thoughts?
Yeah, I think that the answer is we can create an opportunity there if we make sure that we are playing within the boundaries of the National Association of Insurance Commissioners. As long as we don't tip off one of the big key states, i.e. New York, California, Illinois. So the second question is are we facing off against Bermuda? I think potentially, and really our success has to be, we found a solution to help those companies in Bermuda transact in the United States. Yesterday we talked about two possibles. There might be, how many permutations are there? I don't know. One is under the current tax code, there's a lot of Bermuda companies that are electing to be US taxpayers. So operating out of Wyoming, which has a low tax base, might be the most efficient way to execute in the United States, especially if we have a relationship with the Bermuda authorities. I could also see US companies wanting access to Bermuda and the EU wanting to domicile in Bermuda or domicile in Wyoming if we have a relationship that gets them to Bermuda and the EU. And the reason for the audience, the reason I mentioned the EU, right now Bermuda is probably the most efficient way to the EU because of the regulatory interrelationship between Bermuda and EU.
Go ahead, Joel. Mr. Reville.
Thank you, Chairman Rothfuss. How much of the reasons that compelled you and the other global reinsurers to Bermuda, how much of that was streamlined regulations, friendly regulators versus tax?
I would say 10 years ago, 6 years ago, it was 50-50. Right now, it's almost all regulatory benefit. We've really lost a lot of the tax advantage.
Mr. Bill, please continue.
Thank you. Does that then create an opportunity where if we hypothetically replicated Bermuda's regulatory framework, that there's an indifference in tax between, and of course, you're not getting around the federal piece of it. So is there, if we were to replicate the regulatory framework that exists in Bermuda or make something as friendly, would a global reinsurer be indifferent?
That was exactly my thought back in September when I met with Dr. Seidel, and it was a personal experience, right? If I've lost the tax benefit of federal taxes and I'm elected to become a US taxpayer, but residing in Bermuda, I still have a host of costs in Bermuda. I also have some challenges in that all transactions that occur in Bermuda need the actual people from the two counterparties to be in Bermuda. And that's increasingly difficult to execute, right? Getting to and from a small island in the North Atlantic isn't easy in a global pandemic. And so the whole idea is if we could create a jurisdiction that in a very friendly fashion replicates some of the benefits of Bermuda, yeah, I think you would have some migration to Wyoming.
Go ahead, continue, Joel.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. That being the case, could you help us frame the opportunity? How many reinsurers are there? How many remain independent? There's been quite a bit of consolidation, right? So just this would really only appeal to standalone reinsurance entities, I presume.
I don't think I have a good answer for you today, but I'd love to come back with a written answer. And part of it is we're seeing a huge class of new reinsurers being formed right now as post-pandemic, the insurance market is going through a hardening of rates. And so it's becoming a much more attractive environment. So we're seeing all kinds of new startups. So I'd love to get those statistics for you. And maybe we break them out as to who are US based, who are truly global, and what that population looks like.
Thank you. Mr. Reville?
Thank you, Chairman Rothfuss. Mr. Brooks, is it possible if there's a consolidated sort of global insurance company that has a reinsurance division, can that reinsurance division be domiciled in Wyoming? And would a more friendly legislative framework apply there? And can that be sort of distinctly separated?
Mr. Brooks?
Yeah, the answer is yeah. And I think that's the vision, is create an environment just for that particular transaction base.
Mm-hmm. Mr. Bill, go ahead.
Thank you, Chairman Rothfuss. Just a comment to the committee, which is, I think there are different dynamics at play, but looking at what has happened to the global sort of offshore trust environment over the last 10 years, there were regulations put in place, FATCA and the Common Reporting Standard by offshore taxing entities that sort of leveled the playing field of these sort of island nations that had previously been trust havens. And the upshot of that has been that the attractiveness of the U.S. market has compelled trust to re-domicile to the U.S. in a fairly significant way. Unfortunately, Wyoming's grabbing a share of that as well. But there could be a very similar opportunity here if the playing field levels between Bermuda and the U.S. Or any other jurisdictions in the U.S. There very well could be an opportunity here for that migration to happen. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Mr. Ville. Additional questions for Mr. Brooks? Any other thoughts at this time? Mr. Brooks, one more concept that I wanted you to touch on that we visited about, and this doesn't fall into the low-hanging fruit category, but I think it falls into a nice discussion category, is part of your vision with regard to reinsurance being the fact that it sounds like there's quite a bit of friction in the marketplace at this point in time, and that Wyoming might be a place to potentially have lower friction, easier transactions, and a marketplace that is a little bit more open. So I wanted to ask if you could kind of comment on potentially your vision there further down the road beyond the low hanging fruit, but kind of what's the 20-year future of reinsurance, and how can Wyoming be involved in that?
Sure. And I'd like to note that my colleague Diana Myers has joined the call. And I think what we're thinking is, after the low hanging fruit, we think that the industry migrates to a digital transaction, more standardized. Do we ever get to a truly standardized reinsurance contract? Probably not, but we get to a more standardized reinsurance contract that could be transaction on a digital platform. We're certainly seeing that in certain subsegments of reinsurance, where investors and insurers are coming together in a more exchange-based manner. So we were dubbing this the Wyoming Insurance Exchange, and whether it's a physical exchange or an electronic exchange, the idea is to create a regulatory framework that is very efficient and responsive for the participants. And then we create a transactional base that takes out some of the cost or replaces some of the cost. And we try to bring in some of the big intermediaries that are already important to the ecosystem, and have them execute here in Wyoming. There's a lot of cost going to Bermuda. There's a lot of cost going to Lloyd's in London. There's a lot of cost going to some of these different jurisdictions, even Barbados. And so if we can streamline this process, I think people will be very interested.
Thank you. And Ms. Myers is welcome to join, and we can see if she has any comments to add since she's with us. Welcome, Ms. Myers. Good to see you.
Thank you, Chairman Rothfuss. No comments to add.
Okay.
Ray's covered it. Thank you.
Great. Thank you. Well, Select Committee, any further questions? This is the beginning, obviously, so we don't have to have exhaustive questions. I just wanted everyone to start contemplating this. Mr. Reville?
Thank you. I think this is an interesting opportunity, and if Mr. Brooks would be so willing, I think there are kind of three questions in my mind that would be great for us to kind of then further follow up on. One of them actually maybe is not a question for Mr. Brooks, but for us. So the first question is, we already talked about, Mr. Brooks, is just with the scale and the scope of the opportunity. And I think that has two parts. How many companies / what slice of TAM is available to bring to Wyoming? And then I didn't quite get my head around the revenue model you described earlier. So what, that TAM times our revenue model would be sort of question number one. And then question number two, is there a state already doing this? Is there, will this be sort of the tree that falls in the forest that nobody hears because there's just other reasons why folks are going to stay in Bermuda? And then the third, I guess, is maybe more for us to just contemplate, which is, I think one of the reasons why the digital asset legislation has worked as well as it had is the willingness and the progressive nature of our bank regulator. And will there be a similar sort of open arms approach from the insurance regulator? So thank you, Chairman Rothfuss.
Thank you, Mr. Ville. All good questions. And Mr. Brooks, you're free to weigh in on those now, but those might be questions for the future as well that we just have to explore as we move forward.
Yeah, I think it's best if we come back. I'll have our team come up with some responses. And again, we've got a team member that we'll introduce at the right time, who was the Commissioner of Insurance for the state of New York, and he will be able to help answer, I think, that question around, is there a state already doing this? And we can also talk to you about, how to support your regulator, how to support your Department of Insurance, and is there a best practice out there?
Thank you. And Mr. Brooks, one thing that we as a select committee can do is, I asked you to put together the low-hanging fruit concepts. What could we do quickly, and what would be the best approach to start making us look attractive. And I think our staff and the select committee members can start exploring what it would look like if we were to contemplate legislation, begin discussions with our insurance commissioner, and figure out what these kinds of things would look like, so we can begin our exploration too, now that we have kind of some of the low-hanging fruit concepts that we should begin to explore. We'll begin to explore those.
Fantastic. I look forward to coming back in front of you.
Excellent. Any final questions, final thoughts, committee? All right. Thank you. Thank you, Ms. Meyer. Thank you, Mr. Brooks. Appreciate your time. Appreciate the testimony and the innovative thinking that you've brought to the committee. This gives us a lot to think about. And hopefully this will give us something to hit the ground running with for the next interim.
Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you.
Take care. All right, committee. We had a break scheduled. Does anyone need a break right now? Happy to? Nope. Looks like we're all good. Okay. So our final presenter today, we're going to hear from Arcoin. I'd ask Mr. David and Ms. Bingham to join us if they're here, or any other Arcoin folks that we have. Come on in.
Mr. Chairman,
Yep.
we are just waiting for them to log on.
All right. No worries. And again, select committee, this is an information presentation that I had an opportunity to visit with Arcoin a while back, and they're doing some things that nobody else is quite doing with transactions in treasury notes in a way that I think could potentially benefit some of the work we're doing, as we're talking about ways to engage with Wyoming government, pay taxes, do other things. So I wanted an opportunity for us to visit and learn about this.
They left for a minute. Are we waiting on something?
Representative Greer, we're waiting for our final presenters to get into our Zoom.
Oh, okay. This crew, Mr. Chairman, was, and unsettling in its muteness. I have never thought.
Something clearly was wrong if nobody's talking.
You know, I was going to comment that the Pal Panther, he looked like he was ready to go just wrestle an elk down by himself. He's got sort of this rough, rugged, almost northwestern Wyoming look about him.
Maybe we can get that on video.
I had a beer with Frankie Gonzalez last night.
Oh, nice.
Yeah.
While we're on the subject of hunting and waiting, how are the birds this year?
I have not had a chance to get out. My new job has really put a damper on my bird hunting, unfortunately. So
Yeah, occupational hazard.
yeah. Hopefully one of these days I'll learn to delegate and not get down in the weeds, because that, you know, that's good at that.
All right. Well, let's take a 5-minute break, and we'll try and reach out and see what the problem is. So I don't want everyone to have to sit around and wait. 5 minutes. We'll come back and get going when we get back. JD, we can see you.
Fantastic. I think you actually should be able to hear me at this point. Does that
We
sound
can. Yep, we gotcha. Thanks.
okay? So I'd like to apologize to all the members of the committee.
JD, one second. We've got, I think, a few more to join before we get started. I'm not completely certain, but we'll give Representative Greer one more minute and then we'll get started. All right, we are at 11:35, ready to get to our last agenda item. JD, thank you so much for joining us today and sharing some information about Arcoin and what you and your group have been up to with Arca Labs. We're happy to have you. And again, this is an informational session. I had an opportunity to talk with JD, learn a little bit about some of their technology, and think it might be one more puzzle piece that fits into some of the work that we've been doing, because we obviously are trying to find a bridge between digital assets, cryptocurrency, and the state of Wyoming. So with that, we do have a presentation committee that I think JD is going to take us through. So that's in your committee materials. And JD, the floor is yours. Please introduce yourself. Take a minute to introduce yourself, a little bit about your background, and then walk us through the material that you have to present.
Absolutely. Thank you very much, Chairman. My name is Gerald David, and I'm the president of Arca Labs. I've been a member of the cryptocurrency community for the past 5 or 6 years, and worked in traditional finance prior to that. I'd like to thank the members of the committee today, and specifically co-chairmans Rothfuss and Olsons, for allowing us to have the opportunity to speak with you. I've been watching the committee at work over the past 2 days. I want to congratulate you on the progress and the initiatives that you're tackling in the state of Wyoming. You're leading by example and have the support of the entire digital assets industry, regardless of where we all live. That said, it's my pleasure today to introduce you to ARCA, the ARCA U.S. Treasury Fund, Arcoin, and how we think this could aid in some of the initiatives that you're working on currently at the state level. With that, I'd like to share a brief presentation. I've included this morning, so it should be in your printed materials as well. Great. Is my screen visible to members of the committee?
You are set.
Great. I'll allow you to read the disclaimers on your own. They're quite lengthy, as you can see. That said, please allow me to introduce you to ARCA. ARCA as a company has been around for over 3 years now. Our team is 15 strong. We have offices both on the East Coast and the West Coast. And generally speaking, there are 2 different divisions. The division I represent today is ARCA Funds. ARCA Funds creates real-world products using traditional structures, aided by and facilitated by blockchain. So we look at the asset space. We look at creating structured instruments, and those structured instruments contain elements of the blockchain to capitalize on the efficiencies that are created therein. There are 3 different components today that I'm going to introduce the committee to for the sake of clarity. The first really is a structure, and that structure is referred to as the blockchain transferred fund. That's something we've pioneered in conjunction with the Securities and Exchange Commission in DC, and is a federally regulated structure. The second part is the fund. We actually take that structure and we overlaid that onto an SEC registered fund, a 1940 Act fund as well. And the interesting part about that fund is that the output of that fund is the third thing I'd like to talk about, which is Arcoin. And Arcoin is a digital asset that's created and essentially is a digital share of that actual fund. So let me introduce you to these 3 concepts. One of the main reasons why we've been working along this path is we believe that blockchain can allow us to further innovate on existing structures. The 2 existing structures that we're focused on specifically are mutual funds, as I'm sure you're all aware, and then the exchange traded funds, the ETFs that ultimately were the extension of the mutual funds. The exchange traded funds, the ETFs, arrived essentially because they created efficiencies, both in transparency, tax treatment, but more importantly, lowering operating costs. With the advent of blockchain, we believe that there's a further evolution, an evolution we're terming BTFs, and those BTFs essentially allow for future enhancements, reduce cost, reduce intermediaries, and the ability to transfer these share certificates, these digital assets, these digital shares from one individual or one company to another, creating really the intersection of payments and financial instruments. We've used blockchain in a very interesting way, and there are four main reasons why we opted to incorporate blockchain into these regulated structures. The first is for record keeping. As everyone on the committee knows, blockchain is immutable, and for a record keeping source, it allows us to keep accurate records that are both also transparent. The second thing that's super important about what we've done and how we use blockchain is using the blockchain to essentially take the language that we created in our registration statement and through smart contracts to actually enforce it. So certain attributes, things like allowing only certain types of people to hold the tokens. In one case, you could say AML KYC of approved subscribers. It also has destination requirements. Our use of blockchain allows us to send tokens only to pre-approved wallet addresses as well. And these transfers are done in a safe way. They're done directly, and they're done from a peer-to-peer transfer using the blockchain. The final attribute that we'll go into in a little bit in this presentation is something that we're super proud of. And by utilizing the 1404 standard for ERC tokens, we now have the ability, unlike many of the other tokens on the marketplace, to actually freeze, cancel, and replace our token, which ultimately allows for the element of lost tokens or destroyed tokens to be mitigated. This is a very, 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 very compliance-focused standard and something that we take incredibly seriously with reference to the rollout of our token. The question arises often, which is why do we create this instrument, or why do we create the structure, and what's the importance of it? There's some very, very important attributes here. The first is that it allows us to use existing regulatory structures, and that's very, very important. It's important because what we've created is a closed-end fund, and a closed-end fund is something that's very, very, very familiar to most who are involved in financial services. So this isn't like we're taking an entirely new instrument and trying to gain the confidence of the market. The second thing is that there's a significant reduction in costs. We can do that by streamlining participants, and again, that can be illustrated later in this presentation. We also create efficiencies in terms of creating shortened timelines. The blockchain allows us for transfers within minutes, and those minutes are greatly reduced from the hours that it takes, generally speaking, or days that it takes in some of the other permutations that we've rallied around in the traditional space. This is also done because of the transferability requirements. Being able to transfer tokens on a 24/7, 365-day cycle is a benefit that'll be incredibly helpful, not just for the ways that businesses are conducted, but allowing for transferability of the tokens. And the final point here is that we do provide for the strictest of investor protections, utilizing the regulatory overhang of the SEC. So we've got this structure, and we very deliberately set forth to create a U.S. Treasury fund initially. And we did that, dating back to about 3 years ago, which is when we began our dialogues with the regulator. And we did it for a very specific reason. What we were trying to do is replicate something that has stable value. So essentially would maintain no value, and our goal was to make that value close to the US dollar, so $1, but also would provide an investment incentive, and that incentive could be in the form of interest. Interest in the digital asset space is increasing in its importance right now, and by virtue of using US Treasuries in this fund, what we're doing essentially is allowing for the subscriber to this fund to buy one R coin. One R coin equals one share of the fund. And one share of the fund currently sits at $1. It sits at $1 because our third-party administrator is the one who looks at the outstanding shares in the fund. Rcoin looks at the dollar value in the fund itself, and then ultimately divides that number by the number of shares outstanding, and the value of that share is $1. That was very much a intentional outcome. It allows us to replicate what you hear referred to in the marketplace as stable tokens. One other important point regarding the fund structure, and something that we elected to undergo, I will also note that the conversations that we've had with the SEC date back well over 2.5 years, and in collaboration with the regulator, we were able to create the first regulated closed-end fund investment company that issues its shares as a digital asset. As part of that, and under the 40 Act, there are specific requirements of our fund. One is that we engage with an independent board of trustees. And we have an independent board of trustees that reports directly to the SEC. And we also have several different types of requirements. On the reporting requirements, we have full transparency. We're required to have an auditor that creates audited financial reports. We do that on a semi-annual basis as well. We publish our daily NAV on a daily basis. And then we also have additional requirements, like making sure that our assets are held in trust to ensure that there's no breach, having an independent auditor that looks at our fund, looks at our operations, reports to our board, and in essence to the SEC through minutes, and ultimately ensures that our businesses are functioning under the 40 Act and the way that they're supposed to. We also, we also invite into the structure, which I'll share with you in a little bit, an independent administrator as well. These are the service providers we're required to have under the SEC. Each one of these different service providers actually provides a different function, from accounting straight across to auditing, but to ensure that our funds are safe, secure, and that our fund is operating consistent with the way that we've represented to the SEC. So I mentioned before that we have a structure. I mentioned that we then have a fund, the U.S. Treasury Fund, both of which we created in conjunction with the SEC. And then the digital output of that fund is Rcoin. And Rcoin is the first digital security that is created through a subscription to the fund. So again, you subscribe to the fund, let's say with $10,000. It goes through a process that involves the shareholders, the service providers I showed you before. And then the output of that into a digital wallet that you receive is your Rcoin. And Rcoin is equivalent to the NAV of the fund, the net asset value. Most importantly, it offers peer-to-peer transferability on the Ethereum blockchain. So I'm going to stop here just for one quick second to demonstrate what I'm talking about with this fund. So it's conceivable that someone could subscribe to the fund for $10,000, as I said before. They then receive in their digital wallet, whereby they've provided that address to us earlier in the process, 10,000 Rcoin. Again, 10,000 because one Rcoin equals $1 US. I have the ability, based upon smart contracts and this 1404 standard that we've created, to send those tokens to anybody who has a digital wallet that has already been whitelisted. And by whitelisting, I mean has already been authenticated through our technology system, through AML, KYC, and other different means through our transfer agent, and then is permitted to accept those tokens. So any whitelisted wallet has the ability to accept Rcoin. And I mentioned before that Rcoin itself has maintained its stable value. And I know there's been a lot of talk with reference to stable tokens, how they operate, and how they could be a proxy for a US dollar. On the left-hand side of the slide are many of the attributes that a stable token has. It's backed one-to-one, it's widely distributed, it's redeemable, so it maintains its cash value, and you can get that out at a certain time. It's pegged to a stable instrument, in this case, a US dollar, as I was talking before, and it's auditable. Those are basically the benefits of a stable token. What we found through using the 40 Act is that we could offer some enhanced functions. One of them being interest-bearing, because we're using US Treasuries in the fund. The second is that it's the only SEC-regulated security that offers a fund that offers regulated security. We offer the mandated daily reporting, bankruptcy remote, so there are protections in the event of a default or a breach. And obviously, we have on a one-to-one basis a portfolio of US Treasuries that we maintain at any given time and is audited on a daily basis. The main reason why these features themselves are super interesting and super important is because some of the different issues I think that stable tokens have had over the course of the evolution of this industry. Many of them, obviously have been involved in some of these hacks. We've decided to employ what's known as an ERC 1404 standard. It's a permissioning layer on top of Ethereum, and it provides some distinct functions that are super interesting, again, for us, and we think they could be very interesting for Wyoming as we begin to talk about, potential use cases for Rcoin within the infrastructure that you're building. One, as I said before, AML, KYC approved wallets have the ability to send and receive Rcoin. More importantly, and I think this is something that is very, very interesting and doesn't exist with reference to most of the different assets that are on the marketplace, the 1404 standard allows us to freeze, revoke, and redistribute lost or compromised tokens. So essentially what that means is that if I'm walking and I accidentally drop my ledger on the ground, I step on it, gets run over by a car and falls in the drain, I haven't lost my Rcoin that exists on that ledger. Per our prospectus, and per the rules that we submitted to the SEC, essentially, if indeed you have lost your Rcoin, you can send a signed affidavit to our transfer agent, who will then investigate and, pending a positive outcome, will redistribute and reissue tokens. They'll then burn the other tokens and incorporate those new tokens under that user ID on the ledger that they keep as part of the roles and responsibilities of the transfer agent. So when we're talking about utilizing cryptocurrencies, the 1404 standard allows us to mitigate one of the largest barriers for entry. The final port here is that we have a registration statement that we have to uphold. We're an SEC registered fund. We issue tokens. Those tokens are shares. and ultimately using the blockchain and smart contracts, we're able to enforce all of those different elements of that registration statement. So why did we coin a term BTF, create a fund, and then a digital asset that is backed by US Treasuries? Well, the reason for that is multifold, but we believe that there's a place within the marketplace whereby our token can be utilized in a plethora of different use cases. We're actively working with the marketplace right now in a dozen or so POCs, the far majority of which right now happen to be in transfer of value. Using Arcoin to pay for goods and services, whether it be on a large scale payment level, or whether it be on a project basis. We also have POCs that are running at the exchange level and clearing and settlement, utilizing Arcoin for a multitude of different use cases. As part of that initiative, we obviously had to work with the growing ecosystem. This is just a snapshot of a multitude of partners that we have in the various different use cases that we're building out. And finally, based on the conversations that we've been hearing over the past day and a half, and also previous conversations with Senator Rothfuss, we believe that as Wyoming continues to move forward with several of these initiatives, including the incorporation of corporations and challenging Delaware for a place in that marketplace, we believe that Arcoin could be utilized as a means of transfer and incorporated into several different layers that you're already talking about. Some of those include utilization of Arcoin at the state treasury level, in reserves, taxes, public and private means of payment as well. On that note, I want to thank you again for inviting us to present today. We look forward to working with the committee and ultimately with members of the committee, and I'd welcome any questions that the committee may have at this time.
Jerry, thanks so much. I appreciate the presentation, good details. I want to offer, I know Mr. Reville has some other obligations. So Mr. Reville, do you have any questions to start us off before you have to go?
Thank you, Chairman Rothfuss. And Gerald, thanks very much for the presentation. So the idea is that this is essentially a stable coin that could be an alternate payment system, like payments and settlement system. Yeah, for the state of Wyoming.
Go ahead, Jerry.
That's absolutely correct, Mr. Reville. So Arcoin itself, maintains a stable value. We're a low volatility token that has some inherent benefits. One of the inherent benefits are the protections that are granted under the 40 Act, right? The second one would be that inherently, because the portfolio that backs the actual token is comprised of US Treasuries, in a normal treasury environment, those treasuries will be spitting off interest. That interest is associated with the token holder and then redistributed to that token holder as well. So it's an additional means, and from the industry, you're well aware of how interest has been looked at over the past 12 or so months. It's an additional interest-bearing tool for the token holder.
Thanks, Jerry. Go ahead, Mr. Reville.
Thank you, Chairman Rothfuss. This is a closed-end fund of 40 Act as opposed to an SEC fully registered fund. Is there an advantage to that, apart from the fact that the SEC might not yet approve a fully registered fund?
Jerry?
Yes. So, Mr. Rebel, the process began with the SEC dating back 2.5 years ago. We were granted our effectiveness by the SEC on July the 6th. So the fund itself is actually registered with the SEC. It's an RIC. It's a 40 Act fund. So it is active and it receives all the different protections that would be granted to any other 40 Act fund.
Mr. Reville, go ahead.
Thank you, Chairman Rothfuss. So I'm familiar with one other, and Franklin, I know, had filed with the SEC for a Franklin Templeton Group for a blockchain-enabled U.S. government money market fund, and can you? Not that you need to be benchmarked against them for any reason, but it's just what I'm familiar. It's what I've looked at already, so I'm just familiar. Could you compare and contrast to what Franklin has filed with the SEC?
Go ahead, Jerry.
Yeah. So I think, thank you, Chairman. I think the largest differentiation is that the Franklin Fund has not been granted its effectiveness, and we have. We're familiar with that, but a lot of that application, unfortunately, has received confidential treatment. So I can't speak with any sort of real clarity to the differences. Like I said, the only difference is that our fund is active. We have current subscriptions, and it's being utilized currently through peer-to-peer transactions.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
Mr. Reveal, anything else?
No, thank you, Chairman Rothfuss.
Absolutely. Thank you. Questions for Mr. David? Yep, go ahead, Mr. Kaufman.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. David. Just a quick question. I saw in one of your slides, you mentioned that you had some DeFi partners. I was curious, are there decentralized exchanges that you're trading this token on?
Mr. David, go ahead.
Thank you, Mr. Kaufman. I would say that we've got some DeFi partners and we've exchanged partners as well. There are some requirements that we have to adhere to as an SEC registered fund and ultimately with our token. That would be that we cannot list our token on a non-regulated ATS. So that prohibits where we can actually list. We are in talks with several of the leading ATSs in the US, and our intention would be to list on an ATS. I can't give you an accurate timeline on that, but I can assure you that we're working on that for a pool of liquidity. So your second point with reference to Maker as a DeFi partner, our use case with Maker currently is to be used as multi-collateral DAI. And this may get a little bit deep for many members of the committee, but essentially within the Maker infrastructure, you can pledge a digital asset as collateral. One of the things that Maker as a DAO has been looking for very, very, very aggressively, and we are going to be the first real world asset that'll be used and you could pledge as multi-collateral DAI. We received confirmation from the Maker Foundation that that'll be happening during this quarter, the first quarter of 2021.
Thank you, Mr. David. Follow up, Mr. Kaufman?
Just, Mr. Chairman, thank you for indulging me for my own clarification. So if I understood that correctly, your token for the Maker platform could be essentially a liquidity provider. It's part of a liquidity pool. Is that what you meant?
You'd pledge it as collateral.
Right way? Yeah.
You pledge as collateral in order to receive DAI. So you would pledge Rcoin. Rcoin would be locked. You'd have the benefit. You'd be the beneficial owner. You couldn't transfer it out, but you'd receive DAI in return, and in return of that DAI, then that would release the collateral.
Got it. Okay. Thank you.
Thanks, Mr. Kaufman. Any further questions? Okay. Committee, any other questions? All right. So I'll ask a couple, Mr. David, and I really appreciate this introduction to this technology and I want to emphasize and better understand the significance of the SEC approval and of this stablecoin being backed by treasuries, and can you contrast that with other stablecoins, and maybe provide us a little bit more clarity of what makes our coin a different stable coin, even though, I mean, it's not truly a stable coin from the standpoint of the fact that it actually earns a yield, but fundamentally you're emulating the key benefits of the stable coin. So can you provide a little contrast with other stable coins that we might be familiar with?
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chairman. That gets the heart really of the presentation that I gave, and I think it's an incredible question to ask. So, again, I'm super clear to reference as the chairman did as well, that we're a low volatility token, and that we provide some additional protections. So we'd go as far as saying that when you look at a stable token, we tick every box that a stable token would have, and in fact, we've been called through the press a stable coin on steroids, and I think it's a very appropriate analogy. And it's an appropriate analogy because we do. Like I said, we maintain a stable value, $1, which is the goal of a stable token. But by virtue of the fact that our token is a share of the US Treasury fund, it now has beneficial features that otherwise are only granted on 40 Act funds. So for example, bankruptcy remote, let's use that as an example. So if we talk about another leading stable token, an unregulated asset that's called Tether, that I'm sure everyone has heard of before. Tether right now is in a little bit of hot water. They have the New York Attorney General who's been going after iFinex, their parent company, and Letitia James is alleging, based upon statements by their corporate treasurer, that at any given time, Tether may have 16 or 18 billion dollars outstanding, but may have significantly less dollar value in their bank account. So essentially, what you're saying is they're issuing a stable token that they claim has a certain value, but there's no authentication that that value actually exists, or that those tokens are being held in, or that those dollars are being held in a segregated account And more importantly, if there were a run on Tether and everyone said they wanted to redeem it at one time, where's the money coming from? So these are some of the complications that kind of have arisen in our evolving industry, and some of the things that we are trying to solve for. Currently on the marketplace, there is no other digital asset that exhibits the same characteristics as ours, nor does the exact same thing.
Thanks, Jerry. And this is really the key reason, committee, why I wanted to provide an opportunity for Mr. David to come in and chat with us. As we contemplate trying to integrate crypto and digital assets with the state of Wyoming, we at some point need to get to a point where the state of Wyoming is comfortable taking and holding some type of digital asset, some type of cryptocurrency, which can be exchanged with other cryptocurrencies so that it can engage in the crypto market. And we don't have that yet. So while we are forward looking on digital assets and crypto, you can't go pay the water bill with crypto because the state of Wyoming and your counties and your cities still do not believe they are the equivalent of a fiat dollar. And so with that in mind, Mr. David, can you comment a little bit from that perspective on how this might be helping Wyoming to get to the point, or another state or municipality to get to the point where we should have sufficient confidence in this coin that even a government should consider it the equivalent of fiat?
Yeah, so I think it's a really good question, and it gets to the heart of kind of blockchain and trust, and how is it that kind of what it is that you're engaging in is doing what it's saying it's going to do. We have a very, very, very intricate patchwork of partners that I put up on the screen before. And each one of those partners plays a very, very unique role in the operations of what we do. On a daily basis, there are funds that are flowing to multiple different custodian banks. We've got multiple different folks who have access to those different accounts. We've got a series of checks and balances. And most importantly, on the board level, our board is accountable to the SEC. So kind of we take regulation incredibly seriously. Our entire team comes from regulated entities within the financial space, and we believe that this structure, to the best of our knowledge right now, is the only token on the marketplace or fund or structure that would allow for those additional protections. And it's also one of the main reasons why, when you're talking about large-scale financial institutions and proof of concept and different activities whereby there needs to be a cash payment lag, why our coin is being considered, and it ultimately will be utilized in 2021 on the banking levels. It's because right now this is the gold standard of tokens that are being issued, and that's why we opted to be a SEC registered fund.
Thank you, Mr. David. And one more question. Obviously, you're well aware of our speedy banks and digital asset custodianship, and Mr. Reville had to leave because he had another appointment, but custodying digital assets as a trust. Can you provide us a little bit of context of our coin with regard to how it might help to support a speedy bank or a digital asset trust, and how that interaction would benefit some of the other work that we're doing?
Absolutely. I outlined in the tail end of the presentation a few different potential use cases that we had come up with after conversations we had had with the chairman and other members of the committee. We think that with several of the initiatives you have, Arcoin as a payment layer absolutely makes a tremendous amount of sense for us. Essentially allowing for our smart contracts to pre-whitelist certain addresses and allow for that transferability, or disallow in certain cases, of our token. There may be cases whereby not all citizens of the state of Wyoming shall be receiving a certain benefit. We can pre-program, which wallets will receive and which ones don't. We can pre-program for, a variety of different values, and we can also facilitate for that transferability in a peer-to-peer fashion between either constituents or from constituents to the actual state level government.
Perfect, thank you. And you mentioned the KYC AML, and I think that's a very interesting feature, obviously. And that we've been looking at portability of KYC AML and how to engage with KYC AML on digital assets and cryptocurrency. So can you highlight how you go about it with our coin and getting to the whitelist and how those interactions take place?
Absolutely. Over the course of the 2.5 years while we're working with the SEC, we also were concurrently creating a technology platform that I didn't introduce on this call, and at any given time, I'd be more than happy to walk the committee through. The technology platform we've created essentially is a flow whereby one can subscribe to the fund and then ultimately provide different pieces of information for our transfer agent. Our transfer agent provides AML KYC authority on behalf of the fund. So in the case of an individual or a corporation, there's a series of flows whereby they'll provide information to us, PII, or corporate documentation, depending upon the class of client or company. That'll then be reviewed by our transfer agent. Our transfer agent will then respond back either with a message that affirms or denies the access for the process to move forward. That AML KYC, by virtue of owning our token, attests that you've passed that AML KYC, which is super interesting for us as well, because we're the only token that's on the market that's ever existed in the world, that by virtue of owning that token, you yourselves are quote unquote AML KYC clean. So the permutations there are significant. The other point that I'd bring up, Chairman, that I think is really relevant for this committee is the concern that I'm sure you're wrestling with on a daily basis about what if we use a digital asset and that wallet is breached, or what if we send a digital asset to a constituent and it goes to the wrong wallet address? And those are very, very real concerns. And again, that's why we work so hard to get this 1404 standard passed, which essentially will allow for us to freeze, cancel, and replace these tokens versus having to have your tokens, lost and the dollar value associated with that for good.
Excellent. Thank you, Mr. David. That was a good clarification on that. And I think it's important to highlight that again, when you look at it from the perspective of what a government needs to do, sometimes we've struggled with other options that are available because it doesn't have some of the features that you say. If it goes to the wrong address, we expect to get it back. That we use traditional banking for that. So it's an interesting series of additional features that have been built on through a traditional cryptocurrency that get us there. Go ahead, Mr. David.
Yeah, and the final point, Mr. Chairman, I would say is also the speed by which you could deploy these funds in the event that there was an immediacy. Obviously, because of blockchain and kind of absent gas fees, as I'm sure you're all aware, you could probably deploy a series of payments if it were necessary in a matter of minutes.
Right, Mr. David, I think that is an interesting point. If everybody in the state of Wyoming somehow had a wallet and we needed to get $100 out to everybody in the state of Wyoming, it's a button push away. Okay. Excellent. Any further questions for Mr. David? Again, this is just background, but it does seem to fall into that puzzle piece category where it has features that we haven't heard about before that enable some of the things we've been struggling with. Any further questions for Mr. David at this time? All right, seeing none. Thank you very much, Mr. David. Really appreciate it. We look forward to working with you on some of these project ideas and exploring opportunities and really having more meetings to understand how this can work with the fabric that we're putting together.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. Thank you, committee. We appreciate your time.
Thanks. Bye-bye. All right, committee. That's the agenda for the day. And I'd go to Mr. Hopkinson and bring him back in to see if there's any other actions or clarifications we need to take or make before we adjourn.
Mr. Chairman, I don't think so, but would you like me to review what the committee has done?
That would be great. Please do.
The committee voted to sponsor 21 LSO 263 decentralized autonomous organizations as amended. They voted to sponsor 2016 digital identity as amended, or 216. They voted to sponsor 21 LSO 335 digital assets amendments as amended. Voted to sponsor 21 LSO 28 disclosure of private cryptographic keys as amended, and voted to sponsor 21 LSO 27 commercial filing system update as amended. The committee previously sponsored 21 LSO 227 Chancery Court vacancy amendments, 21 LSO 160 for-profit public benefit corporations, and 21 LSO 156 intrastate crowdfunding exemption amendments, as well as previously voting to move out-of-state state bank charter conversions, 21 LSO 189, and sent that to the Minerals Committee. So for this interim, the committee has voted to sponsor a total of 8 bills.
Excellent. Thank you, Mr. Hopkinson. Any additional actions, committee, that we need to recommend as we close this year? Any other requests as we close? All right, seeing none. Well, Select Committee, I think we did some excellent work. Obviously, there's more work ahead. We have who knows what coming as we move forward in terms of legislative session. So it's my expectation, and I talked with Majority Leader Dockstader about just trying to make sure that we have the opportunity to continue, get repositioned, reappointed, and carry on the work. I do think that there's more good work we can do on the Dow bill, on the digital identity legislation. We promise to work further on that, some of the other work that we have ahead. So even though this is effectively the last meeting of the Select Committee for the 65th legislature, as soon as the 66th gets spun up, I hope we'll get back to work and continue on these topics. Clearly, there's a lot more for us to get done. Mr. Co-Chairman, any thoughts or comments before we adjourn?
Well, just appreciate the committee's work. While I wasn't here to see most of it, I can see the bills that we're producing. So good work has definitely taken place over the last day and a half. I'm glad we added the extra half a day, and hopefully we got some good information on our new topic as well. And just I would echo that those last comments from Co-Chairman Rothfuss, that hopefully I would like to see this committee continue on with the strength that it's had, and that means that hopefully everyone will be returning to the committee, and well, with the exception of Representative Lindholm, of course, but of those who are a member of the 66, that they would be returning, and hopefully our governor's appointees are still able and willing and energized to continue serving with us, and just looking forward to the work that this committee will continue forward.
Thank you, Mr. Co-Chairman. I see a hand from Senator Nethercott. Senator Nethercott.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, Mr. Co-Chairman. I do believe that Representative Lindholm will be required to come back and appear before this committee in order to ensure that we have serendipity between whatever the feds think they may be up to and what Wyoming is actually doing. So I think it will be necessary to see him appear in front of this committee again. I'll call you back.
Senator Nethercott, I agree with that. I think, in fact, I'm not sure whether we have subpoena authority, but
I'll make it.
Yeah, I'm willing to use it if necessary. And Senator Nethercott and Mr. Co-Chairman, this is Representative Lindholm's last opportunity to be a part of the Select Committee and to be a part of prior task force on blockchain. And I want to take an opportunity to thank Representative Lindholm. And I think we all know and understand how important our crypto cowboy was to everything we've done, not just on the Select Committee and the task force before, but all things blockchain started with Representative Lindholm. They would not be a discussion in Wyoming without Representative Lindholm. And he's been really the key to the successes we've had there. And it doesn't stop there. He's done a lot of great things for the state of Wyoming. His food freedom work, his work on making sure Wyoming comes first has been incredible, as well as trying to make sure that Wyomingites are as free as they possibly can be with individual freedoms and liberties. I don't think there's been a better legislator in the last decade than Representative Lindholm, and I lament the poor choice of his district. But we were fortunate, certainly, to benefit from his hard work, his energy, his enthusiasm, his passions, and we appreciate it, buddy. And obviously not over. You're moving on to another location, which, as Senator Nethercott suggested, we can just call you right back to this committee whenever we need you, and we sure as hell will do that. you need to get down to Cheyenne for some good reason. So we'll pull you all across the state to every meeting. I think it would probably be the appropriate way to do it, to make sure that we've got good coordination between our efforts and activities and good Senator-elect Lummis's office. So thank you so much, Representative Lindholm. I appreciate all of the hard work and really for creating something for the state of Wyoming that I see as unparalleled in the last decade.
Mr. Chairman.
Go ahead, Senator Driscoll.
Thank you. I'll file on. I'll second what you just said. It's painful to see him go off this committee and out of the legislature. It's truly been a time of a legislator that's pretty legendary in Wyoming and has actually made a difference on an incredible scale. And he'll be greatly missed. I won't go a whole lot more, but he will definitely greatly be missed.
Call from 160.
Thank you, Senator Driscoll. Any further comments or thoughts before we adjourn?
Yeah. Goodbye, Tyler. It was good knowing you.
Thank you, Representative Greer, ever concise and eloquent. Representative Lindholm, floor is yours, buddy.
Yeah, thanks, Mr. Chairman. I appreciate the opportunity. We've gotten a lot of good stuff done on this committee, and it's been a good ride. You know, for everybody on this committee, I'm gonna miss a lot of you. For some of those not on this committee, I'm not gonna miss you. No, it's been a good ride. As this progresses down the road, I'll be looking to a number of you to keep the dream alive, keep attracting those businesses to the state of Wyoming. We proved over the last couple of years that you can do economic development without spending $50 million on one company. That is a possibility. And so we had a lot of success doing that. I look forward to your future successes and watching that shake out. And particularly, I look forward to enjoying my springs now. Although this spring will probably be a little bit busier than normal. So, but anyways, yeah, good serving with all of you guys. Yeah, see you around.
Thank you, Representative Lindholm. With that, committee, we are adjourned for the year.